Okay, welcome everyone. Today is March 8th, 2022, and this is the regular March meeting of the Wellington Board of Education. It is 7:01 p.m. and I'm going to call this meeting to order. We start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you would please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. We start our regular meetings with a time for the public to hear from all of you. For present to speak. We also have a section at the end of the meeting in the same way. We limit your comments to 3 minutes each, and we ask that you start by stating your name and your address. So if there's anyone here, we have plenty of people in the audience, although many of you are off camera. It's easiest for us if you turn on your camera to make your comments, and then it goes into the video more easily. So if you're interested, we'll start with those who want to speak early at the meeting to come on camera and state your name and address. Hi, Michelle's iPad.
Sorry, I had undone Mike McCoo.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll start with Mike McCoo because you are now off video, and then next we'll go to Michelle's iPad, then Melissa Abercrombie.
Hi, Mike McCoo, Clover Springs Drive. I know that we are getting closer and maybe at a decision point on some of the COVID protocols. And I just wanted to say, despite being a parent who understood why and supported the precautions and believed they were the right thing as a public health measure, I'm hoping we're at a point where we can relieve them. I think there are a lot of advantages to relieve them. But I want to make sure that the board knows that as a local parent, as long as decisions are being made in the interest of the health of our school community and the greater community, I support whatever decision is made. And I do have faith in that the board will do the right thing. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have someone who on the screen says Michelle's iPad. Can you unmute her?
Hi, Michelle Christensen, Birch Meadow Lane. I first have a comment regarding the February 8th Board of Ed meeting. I felt the chair, Ms. Cunningham's behavior toward some of her fellow board members was completely reprehensible and calls into question your ability to hold such a position. Unfortunately, the public has no say as far as your chair position is concerned. It would be nice to see Ms. Cunningham act in the way she claims she would, taking over as chair. From the Board of Ed special meeting on November 29th, 2021, Ms. Cunningham stated, and I quote, "I will strive to be a chair, fair and neutral and fair to all, even if all didn't vote for me. I do welcome your input, whether it's at the meeting or separately," end quote. Ms. Cunningham, I hope to see your actions match your words sooner than later, because even prior to you being seated there, you behaved quite poorly toward your fellow colleagues that weren't in agreement with you. It'd be nice to see several of you on this board start to practice what you preach about respecting one another and trying to meet each other halfway. I'm extremely disappointed this board has chosen to wait instead of having an emergency meeting to remove the masks. Wellington is the last public school to hold a meeting since 2/8 after going through 170 schools in the state, unless perhaps. I saw the merit in waiting for additional guidance on 2/8. However, this additional guidance was released several weeks ago from the State Board of Education, and we are approaching almost 2 weeks since the CDC's guidance was released. I feel that your choice to wait not only neglected the majority of our children and families in schools seeking choice for their children, you neglected your seated duty as the Board of Education member to address this matter in a timely fashion. I hope parents will have conversations with their kids to respect their peers' choices, as well as adults modeling the same behavior toward your fellow community members. If someone feels uncomfortable with what their children may opt to do in school with their mask, it seems as though finding a more controlled environment is a logical choice, since we schooling options from different preschools to tuition schools to even homeschooling. Our children deserve fair and equal treatment, which Wellington is failing to provide our children even beyond masking. Wellington has kept our children mask mandated longer 5% of the schools in Connecticut. I'm asking the board to do the right thing and rescind the mask mandate and make it mass choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Melissa Abercrombie.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to go on the record and say that I do support the removal of the mask mandate. I know that the CDC and the Board of Ed has gone through and discussed removing it, and they've passed that. We don't even have to have masks for our children in the buses anymore. So it just makes sense to have them removed in school as well. So I'm hopeful that the Board of Education considers this when they make their vote today.
Okay, it's also possible for those of you who are on the call to raise your hands. At the bottom of your screen, there's something that says reaction, and you're able to raise your hand that way. So if you would like to be unmuted, please do so that we know that you're interested in speaking. Jim Bullock, you're next. There we go. Oh, Jim, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but try your microphone. Nope.
It may be your earbuds. That happens to my students quite often.
Still no.
You have to unplug it. Did you pull it out?
Yes.
Now we hear you.
Success.
Now you hear
There
me.
you go.
There
Okay.
you go. I figured out one or two things. Eventually I'll get to it. Jim Bullock, Laurel Drive. Just want to let folks know that the selectmen met yesterday and we rescinded the mask mandate on the town side of things. And that was based on reviewing the data and reviewing the general situation and just understanding that, you know, the mask wearing at the town side we felt it was a personal choice. And that, so, you know, we respect everybody's position, whether they want to wear a mask or not want to wear the mask. We didn't feel it was appropriate for the town to tell people to wear a mask or to not wear a mask. So I'm hoping the Board of Ed could arrive at a similar conclusion based on the data before us. Thank you.
Next is Arthur Christensen. There you go. You're unmuted.
Arthur Christensen, 14 Birch Meadow Lane. I wanted to speak tonight in support of removing the mask mandate in schools. I wasn't exactly sure how to approach this because there are thousands of parents all over the state in many different districts who have said the same thing as I would say. And then I thought to myself, why is this even up for debate? When the mandates were first implemented, parents didn't get a say. Many, including myself, were against the mandates, but we were told the advice came from the CDC and the State Department of Health, so that's what's happening. No debate, no input, no discussion. Now the CDC and the State Department of Health have changed their guidance and the state level mandate has been removed. Why is this a discussion on a local level? The mandate in our school should end, period. End of story. No debate, no input, no discussion. As my wife said, this Board of Education was the last school district in the state to act on this mandate out of 170. Many of them had emergency meetings knowing their meetings in March would be too late to act on this because they actually had concern for their children. The guidance came that we were looking for from the State Department of Health on the 18th of February, and there was no meeting scheduled. The guidance came from the CDC on the 25th of February, no meeting scheduled. I ask you, what guidance were you waiting for? I heard a member of the community speak last month saying that kids are fine with masks, and it's really the parents who have the problem with them. I'm going to end my time tonight by saying the following, slowly and carefully. You don't speak for my child. And in turn, I would never dream of speaking for another child or their family. That is why I'm advocating for the only fair and reasonable decision, and that is to remove the school mask mandate and allow children to continue to wear a mask should they or their parents wish. I've seen nothing but pictures of happy kids smiling without masks before going to school, and it's time to finally add the children of Wellington to that list. Thank you.
Sarah Reese is next.
Hello, Sarah Reese, Pinecrest Road. I am looking forward and would like to encourage the Board of Ed to have the masks be optional for Wellington schools. Those who feel it best to continue to wear them should do so. And those who wish to not wear them should be able to make that choice as well. And we all need to be able to respect each other's choices. Thank you.
I don't currently see any other hands up, so I'm going to give everyone a last call. If you are interested in speaking at this point of our meeting, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. I see someone named Jamie and then Amy Sherzai. Jamie next.
Hi there, my name is Jami Koprak. I have a student at Center School. I was also very discouraged that the Board of Ed didn't have an emergency meeting to address masking when so many other schools did. It seemed like it was a little bit dismissed, as it would have just been harder for the board to have a special meeting rather than just make a decision for our kids sooner than now. Our 3-year-old has been unmasked since the mandate was lifted at her daycare. It has been a world of difference seeing her smiling face, seeing the teachers' smiling faces. And I would like to see that also for our son. I think the time is now. And I did just want to thank Mr. Stevens. I did really appreciate receiving that letter ahead of time of this meeting so we could kind of see the metrics. So thank you for that, Mr. Stevens. And thank you for the time.
Okay, next, I think Amy Sherzai. Can you unmute her? There we
Hi
go.
there. Hi there, Amy Sherzai, Timberlane. I'm going to offer a little bit of a different perspective here. I'm a nurse of over 10 years and I work in pediatrics. It's a bit discouraging to hear parents that are so frustrated with the board that didn't have an emergency meeting because there isn't an emergency. There's absolutely no harm in masking children. Actually, it's prevented the spreading of COVID in the public schools and allowed the public schools to stay open during this pandemic. I appreciate the action of the schools that protected our children and our school staff as well. And I think that that's important to recognize. I would, on the opposite end of the spectrum, like to see masks remain in place for the rest of the year because we are still in a pandemic and there are still people in the community that are vulnerable to COVID-19. There are people in hospitals in Connecticut dying, and there are people in the United States dying of COVID-19. I just got an email from the state of Connecticut that saying that oral therapies for COVID-19 are arriving in Connecticut pharmacies this. So I want you to recognize that although we have better treatments, therapies are arriving this week. And overall, yes, children are less affected. However, there are children that are vulnerable in our community. And I feel that the benefit of masks outweigh any sort of risk of harm because there is no risk of harm in masking a child. And I would really a little discouraged by parents who aren't willing to consider those vulnerable children and the vulnerable populations that those children may bring COVID-19 home to if they contract COVID-19 at school. It's concerning as a nurse and from a public health perspective. Thank you. And I understand that this is most likely a foregone conclusion, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak regardless. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Samantha Sperry and then Peter Latinskis and then Peter Tanaka.
Hi, Samantha Sperry. I live on Lucian Road, and I just kind of want to second everybody by saying that I agree that it should be a choice for children to wear masks in the school. I don't necessarily agree that I think it's been unharmful for them to wear masks or for so long, but there's not enough time for me to get into my opinion on that. And I think it's good that everyone has an open space to share their opinions and be respectful about it. So yeah, I agree that it's time for the kids to be unmasked in the schools.
Peter, you're not on the main screen that I am. Are you unmuted? Not yet. Go ahead, Peter.
Good evening, Peter Latenchich, 97 Trask Road. Good to be with you all. I had the pleasure of attending the Board of Selectmen meeting yesterday evening, and I was quite pleased to see the mask mandate lifted there, with the proviso that anyone who feels the need for the protections the previous health professional just spoke about can do so by wearing a mask. It works perfectly. I urge the Board of Ed to adopt the same policy. I strongly believe, with all due respect to the CDC and these other outside agencies that have weighed in on these public health issues, that the best determination for our community are the members of our community, especially in our school system where parents should always decide the welfare of their children. Thank you very much.
I believe Peter Tanaka is next.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Peter Tanaka, 125 Mason Road. I was going to remain silent, but I fully don't agree that there is no harm in wearing a mask. As a teacher of adults, I've found that facial expressions and nonverbal communications are completely hampered by masks, and that the two-way communication that's completely necessary to education is stymied at best. And I can see that for our younger children, it'd be even worse. Thank you.
Okay. Again, I don't see anyone's hand raised. So I'm asking if you are interested. I'm going to go through the screens and see if there's anybody on camera like Peter that I missed the first time through. I do not see anyone on camera, and no one is currently raising your hand. Okay, so we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Again, if you're interested, there will be time for present to speak at the end of the meeting, although we have lots on the agenda and it's going to be a while. So moving on next to the chairman's report, and I do not have anything to report at this time. So we're going to move on to communications.
I will just add to what went out on the published agenda. I believe the last name you saw was Donna Dupuy. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's what's on the agenda.
You received communications beyond that after the agenda was published from Sarah Geary. There was one that I'm just naming We the People. It was not signed by anything other than We the People. There was one from Tia and Tim Kohlers, one from Kylie Fultz and Brandon Priola, one from Arthur Christensen, and one from Joseph Calla.
Okay, thank you. We've received all of those emails and have if we haven't read them already, those that came in just today, they are in our email box and we can read them if we haven't already. So thank you for contacting us. We do read the emails that you send us. Next, number 6 is the superintendent's report.
Thanks. It's a little weird to do Board Member Appreciation Month again through a screen. Maybe we'll actually get to see each other in the future, but just wanted to say thank you for all your hard work and dedication to support our students and staff. Obviously, you know, you're unpaid volunteers and you're tasked with making decisions in the best interest of our school community. So typically I'd hand this to you or it'd be on the table you enter the room, but we got you little journals and it just says Willington, March 2022 School Board Recognition Month. Thank you for your service. So just on behalf of the staff and families, thank you for your service. You do not have an easy job. So thanks. The future assessment data meeting, we're starting to gather information for a future special meeting that I believe it's going to be operated as a workshop. Just give you some idea about what's going to be in that meeting as far as what information we'll go through. We'll go through Smarter Balance results, SBAC. We've done that already, but we're going to compile them together. iReady data, which is our assessment we do 3 times a year. We'll go through attendance data because attendance data is really important, especially after the last couple of years. And then some of the student population data, such as special education or free or reduced lunch numbers. So that's some of the information that will be there. We'll connect the data to the Board of Ed goals. and also the admin goals. So you can see the connection. And I'm hoping this can be some point in April, as it's going to take a while to put the data together as in one report. I talked to one member already, and I'm going to propose April 26th. It's a Tuesday night. So if the board could just respond back to Brenda on that one. Time is not set. I figure sometime in the evening. It doesn't have to be 7 p.m., but I'm sure parents would like to attend, participate. So again, I'm throwing out the date of April 26th. So if you can respond to Brenda on that one, I would appreciate it. The 21-22 update. I'm going to start with something non-COVID today, and I'll wait till the COVID stuff till later on. This past weekend was the Eastern Regionals Music Festival, and we had students from all over the state, from 40 schools auditioned and were chosen to perform. Fall School had 6 choral students that were selected to the 70-person choir. And so they had a rehearsal on Friday night, and then all day on Saturday. And then it was the experience had a culminating event with a performance that evening in Enfield High School. So I just want to, give a shout out to our students that were there. Our student representatives were Ava Bray, Cadence Coombs, Iris Fahey, Max Gunaris, Luke Langevin, and Shauna Pham. And I just also want to say thanks to Mr. Phillips. He worked to facilitate this exciting opportunity for our students. So, if we can get out there and our students are participating in these things, it was great. So congrats to them. The enrollment study that was completed, I shared that enrollment study projections with you. I think it was the end of January that I sent the email. You had the attachment. Dr. Peter Prouda is the one who completed the study. He did a presentation to the school building committee. And you can see that it was at one of their January meetings. You can see it's available on YouTube. I wasn't planning on doing a full presentation for the board, but if you have any questions, I can either answer them now, or feel free to reach out to me moving forward individually.
Phil, does that study project our enrollment out about 5 years?
Correct, it does. And it ranges between really 400, I think it was 416, Herb, at our highest. And they're projecting our highest in the next couple of years.
So it's going to increase slightly, you think?
Yeah, I mean, his projections are at that number for the highest was in the next couple of years, but it drops a little bit, but it stays between around that 400 range, between, I would say, 400 and 415, I think it was the number. And I can pull it up to see it.
Does the state use that for the building committee? And do they project out 10 years or 5 years? If you're building a new building.
So these projections, hold on, I'm just going to share my screen and get to it. These projections go through 2031. And basically these projections are what the State Department uses when you're doing some sort of reimbursement project. Could be a building project renovation or a new building. Could also be a roof project. So basically what happens, and I'm just trying to get to the page here, is they use even though this projection goes out beyond the years they look at the highest number within 8 years, and that's the number that they use to figure out what your numbers would be. So this is what he's kind of projecting out, and you can see right here what he's looking at. So 2022 416, 2023 419, 2024 413. They stay above 400. That's about what he's looking at.
Yeah.
And he explains why. I mean, again, he's got all the graphs in there and everything, but it gives you a sense of where his projections are coming from. Any other questions? You're welcome. All right, I'll keep moving then. The enrollment update. So Center School currently has 209 students and Hall School has 185 students. That obviously includes for both buildings the outplacements. So we currently still have a total of 394. I don't think that's changed last report. I will tell you, as you know, we monitor the number of incoming kindergarten students. I don't even have the signs on the green yet because the ground was still frozen. But we currently are expecting 32 students as of today. And I'm going to tell you that number is higher than it typically is at this point of time, last year or any other year. We typically are in the 20s at this point and we're already over 30. So that's good that people are paying attention and letting us know. So we appreciate that. As far as staffing goes, we have some staff movement this month to report. We received a letter of resignation from HMS language arts teacher Jen Edgerton. She's been with us for 12 years. She's going to be finishing the school year out, and then she's going to start a new position, similar language arts position in a town that's closer to home. So she'll be missed, and thank you for her service. We appreciate you. We received a retirement letter from CES Secretary Joan Cordier. Joan's going to be retiring on May 1st, and she has been with us for 32 years in Wellington. So Joan's been here a long time, so she'll be missed. We received a letter of resignation from paraprofessional Mary Bryant, who took a position closer to home. We did hire Brittany Stickles as a paraprofessional. And again, just the folks that are leaving, we appreciate the time that they've spent in Wellington and all the work that they've done for our students in our community. As far as the insurance claim update at Center, we are continuing to make progress on the repairs from the flood and the pipe burst. No repairs yet other than the heating unit in the gym, but we're making progress. We've picked out new carpet colors and tile colors. All the materials are on order, which is good. Once we're not setting any dates for certain until they're shipped and we know they're on the way because of supply chain problems. And so the installer will let us know when that's the case. It's going to occur mostly on weekends. And the hallway asbestos abatement project is going to be completed over April vacation. So that'll be part of it. And then we will be meeting with the center school principal later in the week. I've got a wicked echo. Do you have a wicked echo, or is it just me?
Nope, I think you're fine.
Okay. We're going to be placing a large order later in the week to replace all the furniture, materials that were damaged from the preschool room, because that was where the majority of the damage happened. I will have a total to the cost to the district, obviously, once the project is done. At this point, I anticipate it's going to be around $20,000 after the abatement, because that's not covered by insurance and the deductibles. So at this point, I'm hoping to cover that with funds that are still available in the budget by the end of the year, but it's only March, so I can't guarantee that. So we'll keep an eye on it, and I'll let you know as those bills come in for what's final.
Is there any
Oh, sorry, Herb.
as a result of that, the flooding that we had, because it was quite extensive, of mold and that type of thing down the road, or
no mold.
Insurance take care of most of that?
Insurance is taking care of everything that was wet. And so they have, the last time they went in, they have some fancy gadget that they use to monitor moisture, and all of the floors and carpet were dry, and they can see the moisture if it's underneath the tile too, which is good. We still have the basically air purifying units that are in the hallways in the classrooms running. That's covered by the insurance claim.
So they're still drying it out, are they, or?
It's there just as precautionary, but everything, all of the readings that they had everything was dry. But because the moisture, basically what happens is it can buckle the tile, that's what's got to be replaced in the carpet. So all of that replacement will be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions?
All right. Professional development. I just wanted to give a brief update on professional development. The February 18th and March 4 professional development we had a variety of offerings at both buildings using iReady reports to develop intervention groups, utilizing the iReady teacher toolbox to support students and mainly during intervention. We did some project-based learning, professional development, and obviously it depends on what group you belong to here, what professional development you participated in. We had some unit planning. We had some more time for letters. And we had physical management training that's required for the members of our school crisis team. So that occurred as well. I will tell you the admin team also participated in an additional iReady training. We got a deeper dive into reports, which is really good, down to standard level. So we can really get a sense of strengths across grades and across the district. But I just want to share that this time has been critical for staff, just for that professional development and it really in the end to improve student outcomes. So thank you for supporting that. And a lot of that has been funded by COVID grants. So. That is my report.
Hey, Herb, every time you move something on your desk or picking up stuff on your microphone, do you mind if I mute you? And you'll come off mute if you have a question?
I'll mute myself, okay?
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Unless you have questions, don't mute yourself if you have questions, because I'm just now calling for questions on the superintendent report. Okay, and seeing no questions, we will move on to the next piece, which is number 7, the financial report.
So the financial report is on screen. I'll again highlight the major changes. And at this point in the year, there's really nothing major. We're talking about, $10,000 or $15,000. So program 1, we ordered some supplies and 2 laptops. One of the laptops was actually a replacement, and the other one was actually damaged in the flood. So one will be covered by insurance, but they did order some supplies there as well. In program 2, the winter sports transportation was encumbered, and they also ordered some supplies. They're doing okay. You can see the health teachers not encumbered there. In program 3, which is special ed, we did receive our first chunk of excess cost payment. And so that account is up significantly, which is good because that's what covers those. That's why we apply the grants for excess cost. And then program 4, you can see there's a bit of a hit there. And so we are owed a diesel reimbursement from Region 19, but the newest item, and again, this is something that I'm hoping we can cover with end of the year funds. When you have a student in any district where they become homeless wherever they go to live at the time until they have permanent residency again, we're required to keep them in district, and we're required for transportation. So if we're transporting someone from another town, typically districts share the cost, but there is an overage right now in that cost because of the homeless situation. So we'll obviously pay that and look to see if it can be covered, transfer funds in at the end of the year to balance out that program. So that's basically the gist of what's in the report for this month. There's minimal change in the other accounts. I will tell you that the ARPA committee is considering the air conditioning project for the HMS band room. That was something that you put into CIP. It seems like forever ago. That might have been today that we had that conversation. But they are considering that, and so I'm getting updated pricing on that. And then just as far as the budget process goes, don't forget the Board of Finance is discussing all the budgets at their meeting on Thursday night. So that'll start their main discussions for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Questions on the financial report?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Donna.
Well, I just want a little bit of clarification. So if someone who lived, it's on about the homelessness. So if someone whose residence was willing and something happens that they become homeless and they enter temporary residence somewhere else.
Correct.
I'm making this up, you know, like they go to Tolland. Are we then paying for bus transportation from Tolland to Willington?
Correct. So there's a part of the, I think it's the McKinney-Vento Act, requires you to provide transportation until that student has the stability of you know, some sort of living arrangement that's not considered to be temporary again. And so typically what would happen is we would reach out to Tolland and let them know, and we would split the cost of that. And so your example is exactly spot on, Don. It could be Tolland, it could be to Mansfield. Sometimes they find housing in Willington, although sometimes it's a hotel, and obviously we only have one hotel. And so it's just a matter of where that housing is. And so we end up basically whatever town they're temporarily placed in is where we share the costs with.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Herb, yeah.
Well, that's provided for under the, what is it, McKinney-Vento Act, I think.
Correct.
And so that if a student is at E.O. Smith and they come from another town, we have to pay for to service them. And if they live in, say, New London, or have previously, and they're homeless down there, then we have to split the costs with New London, but we still have to transport them.
Correct. We split the cost of the transportation, correct.
But on the transportation, if they live in town, all we have to do is get a taxi for them or a bus or.
Yeah, correct. And that's a good point, Herb. Thanks for saying that. It's not typically a bus. It might be a van. Depending on the age of the student, it could be a taxi. And we try to be creative, just like when we do any outplacement to transportation. If there's a town next to us or somebody that's driving through to get to a place, we try and coordinate with them. And this is no different. And we just try and work with the family and the whoever's transporting. Could be M&J, could be EastCon, whoever's, could be a taxi service. But obviously that's very dependent on the age of the student and making sure it's an appropriate transportation company.
So this whole program that we have in place for this homeless student is to serve them and make an adjustment that is compatible, which is very helpful as far as they're concerned, because they go through a lot of trauma.
Right.
So it's a very, very important program that we have going here.
It is. It provides stability for a student in a really challenging time. I mean, that's the bottom line. You know, if someone in district here becomes homeless and they have to be coming in every day from another town, they have the stability of their classroom. They know their teacher, they know their friends. So I think, you know, we're required to do it, but it's also the right thing to do.
Any other questions on the financial report? Okay, so moving on to 8 committee reports. Are there any committees that met in the past month?
Yeah, and if it's okay, I think the policy committee wants me to share out what we talked about. I see a nod from 1, 2, so I'll share. So the policy committee had met on March 3rd. The committee reviewed policy 3171, which is the unexpected education funds account. And just to give a little background on this account, the Board of Finance can approve excess funds be transferred to the non-lapsing account for the Board of Education. So at the end of the budget year, if you have some money left over, you can request that money go into this account. I identified an issue with the policy, and I shared it with the committee. And when you want to access the account, when the Board of Ed wants to access the account, the funds from the account, the way the policy is written right now is it requires you to forward a request to, you obviously approve it, and then you forward your request to the Board of Finance. And then they can authorize up to $20,000 a year in a single year. And if it's anything over 20,000 goes to town meeting. Well, the challenge with that is, number one, the state statute doesn't require that, but the challenge is in the area of special education. It's extremely limiting. And if we have an outplacement, we can't, or some significant increase in cost for special education, we cannot share information on the case. Really, all we can say is very simply, we have new special education costs because it's confidential. And because we're so small, you really have to be careful with what you share because you don't want to give away information about the student. If it goes to town meeting, because it's over $20,000 and it's voted down, the board is still required to pay that amount. And so it's limiting in that. And per the state statute, once the Board of Finance approves the transfer into the non-lapsing fund, the funds belong to the Board of Education, and the statute says that. And the other piece of that is the funds that are being transferred into the non-lapsing fund were already approved for educational purposes by the taxpayers. So if you were to go to town meeting, they're really approving educational funds that were already approved in a prior budget, if that makes sense. And so going back to approve the funds for educational purposes again seems unnecessary, and it opens kind of challenges for the board where you don't want to be having conversations and seem less transparent because you can't answer, questions about special education. So I recommended some adjustments to the policy for the Board of Ed to spend the funds without returning to the Board of Finance or to town meeting. It basically follows the state statute. It's not something I have control over. It's not like the budget where I'm approving funds. The only way in this, the updated recommendation is to return or is to have the board vote on it. Okay. So obviously I realize you haven't seen this policy. I'm sharing this information with you simply tonight to share what was talked about at the meeting, but also because the committee felt it was important that because the Board of Finance has been part of the process, that we reach out to them. I have an email drafted already to send off to the Board of Finance to request to get on their agenda, just to give them a heads up that the board discussed a change. The committee is going to be recommending it to the full Board of Education, and that's just to let them know. So that's really what our meeting was about, and that you would be seeing the policy in the future, but that I'll be asking Chairman McCoo of the Board of Finance that if they have any questions about the adjustment to the policy, that I'm glad to answer those questions. So did I miss anything, policy folks?
Nope, I don't think so.
The amount that we can put in each year was raised, well, it's 2%, I think, but we can have a maximum of 3% of our budget in there. It can accumulate up to that amount.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 2% is what changed. It used to be 1%, and now it's 2% per statute. The town or the board, when you made this policy, decided that you wanted to cap it at 3%. That's not part of statute, but I think the policy committee said just leave that alone. It's okay. The 3% is okay. It's a fair number.
Yeah, and some other parts of the closing the fund, for example, if the Board of Finance has that prerogative, so they do have some control over it. And if
Correct.
that comes out, then the Board of Finance has to go to a town meeting, I guess, for a public notice before it can be closed. But it's a pretty valuable account to have. If you run into a problem with anything, educational problem, alt placement or boilers or anything, we can tap into that amount.
Correct. Anything that is for education. And that might be something that's non-recurring. It might be an emergency. It could be books. It's whatever you would decide that you wanted to use that money for educational purposes. And don't forget, that account is audited. So you vote on it and it's audited. It's got to be, you have to show, to follow state statute, you would have to show that it's being used for educational purposes.
Right.
Additional questions?
I have a question, but it's more about the policy committee. I just respectfully request that the next time the policy committee meets, that they address how we are going to handle correspondence received from people in the community. Thank you.
So I can respond to that, Donna. One of the things that we talked about was we scheduled kind of a layout of, because that was the only policy that we specifically spoke about at the committee meeting. But there was probably 5 or 6 other policies that were listed on the agenda just to try and get a plan of how to tackle them the best way to do that. And one of the items that was on there was just that policy that you're referring to.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I know curriculum met too, Michelle, I'm sure.
And I believe we do have some of that later in the agenda under new business. Is there anything from the curriculum committee that we need to adjust or discuss before that?
It's going to be the same. Can I just also say, Michelle, that the SBC committee, and Ann, you can chime in here. I've been working with Scott Pellman for the school building committee. He's our owner's project manager, and we've been working on programmatic space needs so we can write the ed specs. I have been working on a draft of the educational specifications, and anticipate you're gonna need a special meeting in the near future to review them. It's a lengthy document. It's going to take some time, but basically the ed specs it's what helps the board describe the various learning activities and the spatial requirements, where they are in the building, and if there's any special requirements, so that if you get an architect to come in and design something, they know what they're trying to achieve. And those ed specs are done by the Board of Education. They're approved by the Board of Education and shared with the school building committee. So that's we're working on it, and we've made some good strides actually in the last week and a half. Scott Pellman and I have, and so we'll be Brenda will be reaching out on that behalf too. I think that's going to be a separate special meeting just around ed spec.
Okay, thanks for that update. Okay, seeing no further questions on that, let's move on to new business. I'll have a motion to approve the minutes from our regular meeting of February 8th.
I so move.
Do I have a second? Everybody's like, oh. So because this is a video meeting, not everybody has the same video capacity, and the camera doesn't pick up motion, only if you're talking and you get the yellow square around it.
You told me to mute myself, and that's what I did.
I know, I apologize. It's you win one way, you win the other way. So Herb, was that a second? Can you come off mute if you'd like to second that?
I'll second Ann's motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion on the minutes from February 8th? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of our regular meeting from February 8th, 2022 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Moving on to the next one, we have the minutes of the curriculum committee from February 24th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Laura. Is there a second? You have to come off mute, Ann.
I will second it.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for the curriculum committee? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the curriculum committee from February 24th, 2022 signify by saying aye.
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 Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, with an abstention, we're going to have to do a roll call vote. Is that correct, Phil? Right? Okay, so I'm going to just go through as we are on the screen. And if you would say aye, nay, or abstain so that it is on the record. Brianna Ross?
Aye.
Ann Grosjean?
Aye.
Herb Erico? Oh, we have to come off mute to hear you, Herb. I'm sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Laura Rodriguez,
Aye.
Tracy Anderson,
Aye.
Donna Cook,
Abstain.
and Michelle Doucette Cunningham, aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next is our next two items are the English Language Arts Curriculum Set 1, and then there was Curriculum Set 2. Would you like to start with this, Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, just a quick introduction. So the curriculum committee has reviewed both of these and put both on tonight, realizing it's a lot of reading for the board. They're reviewing curriculum on a regular basis now, and that's kind of our expectation. And they'll be submitting lots of units to you for approval, really over the next couple of years. And we're starting with ELA. We have a calendar for the approval, and we do expect all of the ELA curricula to be approved by the end of the summer. So these are the first two sets that you are looking at. And really the only change from the time I think that the first set that came out was to make some adjustments in the assessment section. And it was really just to separate and make it very clear what assessments were, being used for that specific unit. We had iReady on there. We had, I think we might have had SBAC maybe in another section. And so now that's broken apart, and I believe you can see that change in set number 2. So I have Aaron Conley here, who's the Director of Curriculum Instruction, and Kristen Stevens is here, and they are, I'm going to unmute you, sorry, both. They are both have been writing feverishly to get this work done. And so I'm not sure, Aaron or Kristen, if you want to add anything to that introduction.
I'll just specify the specific changes we made between the set we first sent and second was in the assessment. And what we did was we had everything listed under summative and between summative and formative, and we broke iReady out into as a identified as a benchmark assessment rather than the summative. And then we had under the diagnostic to make it clear that diagnostics were more as needed and not necessarily the whole battery of diagnostics done for the entire unit. So we just specified them as needed. So those were the specific changes made. Everything else would have been the same as the first set.
Anne?
Erin, could you explain, we have a lot of parents on tonight. Could you explain the difference between those 4 types of tests so they understand the difference? Thank you.
Sure, Ken. So a benchmark assessment is usually done as I would equate it to like a pulse when you go to the doctor, or a temperature check, just to kind of say, hey, how is everything going, to see if we should go a little deeper. When we do iReady, which is the benchmark, if you scroll down, Phil, just down a little bit more, I'm going to go bottom up. There you go. So our benchmark is iReady. You can see it's 3 times a year. It's what we would call like that, again, that temperature check for grades 2 through 4, just to make sure that if all the kids are getting what they need, and it gives us that general overview of how things are. If you can scroll up a little bit. So let's say during that benchmark or temperature check, we kind of get this, what we would call like a yellow, and it says, oh, go a little deeper. There's some need here, but you need to be more specific with what that is. So we'll do one of those diagnostics listed there to get a little bit more specific with what we need to do to help the child. And then the summative would be the end of unit. So you've taught your entire unit. How do we know what they've learned, what they're supposed to learn from that unit? That's what the summative measures, is they're learning from that particular unit. And then the last type of assessment, if you scroll up a little bit, which some of those listed there are formative. Formative assessments, all those listed under formative are really just information for the teacher to make sure daily lessons that the students are mastering the objectives of the daily lessons. So they're more informative for the teacher, so she or he can make changes to their instruction regularly.
Thank you for that, Erin.
You're welcome.
Is there anything from the committee in particular that you'd like to say to us as your peers, since you're the experts who have dove into this more deeply?
Are you looking for Kristen or Aaron, or the committee members?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, for the committee members rather than for the staff.
I don't know, we spoke about the structure when we presented the units last time. So, I think the board has seen that in one unit. We've gone through, as Phil was saying, a lot of units. And we do want to start approving them as a board, but we understand that the whole board may not have had time to go through both sets. So I think that's something, we'll look at here, but we on the committee were very impressed at the structure of the curriculum and the ease of use for teachers of it. We asked for certain things to be added that would make it more understandable by non-teachers, such as a glossary, because there are so many educational terms that you can get a little bit lost in them. So, but we are, I want to speak for the whole, well, I think I can speak for the whole committee because we talked together and we were very, very impressed at the amount of work being done and the quality of the work, and really wanting to see this move forward.
I think it's also important to mention that there was input from the teachers. I think a lot, and I won't even say a lot, but a good amount of what it is what they're doing, but it's just being put into a document. They will also have the opportunity to teach it and respond once again, make suggestions, improvements, whatever they feel is necessary. And then Kristen has spent years with this this curricular area. So it's I think it's wonderful that she, with Erin, is having the opportunity to get it all down on paper or online or however it will be. But it's a real collaborative effort. And I think that's really important because you want teacher ownership as they're using the curriculum in their classroom.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that because I think that's important for people to understand. In a curriculum cycle, it should never just sit on a shelf. So we anticipate that, if this gets approved, that as teachers are implementing and they're providing feedback, we're going to be updating those documents. And then the revision is based upon teacher input. And that's what's going to come back to the board on a second time. So, part of Erin's 3-year adventure is really to make sure that there's a process in place, not only for approving curriculum, but then the revision process and setting us up so that, when she departs, the grant money to fund Erin's position is gone, that we have the capability to make sure we're on a revision process. And it doesn't have to start all over again. It doesn't mean we're going to look at ELA curriculum in 3 years. It just means that we can update as we go and that we have a process in place because it should never just be stalled. We want the teacher input. We want the parent input on things. There might be a new text that comes out or new information. So really good point, Ann.
And that point was actually, that was a big part of our PD, our ELA PD and rollout last Friday. So one of the analogies I gave to the teachers was, think of this is the engineering design process. This is our prototype 1. Every year as they provide their feedback, we revise it and make it just a little bit better. So until we get continually beautification of the units.
Okay, so now that you've mentioned an iterative process of revisions, and it already seemed like there was quite a lot of curriculum coming our way. Can you give us a sense of how many units we're going to be looking at every month for the next year, 2 years till Erin leaves? How big of a fire hose are we talking?
So it will depend on the curricular area and the length and depth of each unit. For ELA, we're typically looking between 16 and 18, depending, because the middle school has less units because they blend the reading and writing. So between 16 and 18 units per set.
And how many sets?
For ELA, we have 4 total. So 2 more sets after this.
Okay, and then on to math and science and social studies and, okay. So I think it's fair to say this is the very first of approvals that we are going to have to make, but it is far from the last, and we should expect this to be a standing item on our agenda for at least the next 18 months, if not longer. Is that fair? Okay.
Yes.
So not all of you who are on the Board of Education knew you were signing up for this, but thank you to the curriculum committee who are diving in deep, and for the amount of volunteer time you spend, all of us, in reading and reviewing these, because it is not a small list. Yes, questions? We'll start with her.
It's not really a question, but I did skim through the first set, and Erin, I was amazed at the quantity and quality of the work involved. It was very well done, and I think I learned a little more about reading and grades kindergarten all the way up through the 8th grade. I did skim through the first draft, and it was quite a chore. If you have 4 more or 5 more of those, you're really putting the board up against the wall. I don't know if I have enough time to read all that material, but the strategies in there and vocabulary development and everything seem to be really super. And I didn't get involved in too many of the sections as far as the content was concerned, but I did pick up on one that I was interested in. It kind of hit me a little bit. It was on the grade 4, I think it was, and it dealt with the reading history. And I know this was primarily English and its development and some of the things that you were doing, but it did mention you got into the history of the Constitution, not in depth, but you did get into not criticizing the Constitution, but different points of view and how it was constructed, and the fact that removing anti-slavery from the Constitution and things of that kind. For example, if I remember, I think you brought up the Lafayette, the French general who came over here and helped us through the Revolution, and how he was opposed to slaves, and he wouldn't sign some documents because it didn't include, releasing slaves from their condition. Also, you mentioned the U.S. flag. Now, I'm very proud of the U.S. flag. It's 50 stripes and 50 stars, and when I see it, I feel proud to be an American. But in this history section, you didn't mention the development, all of the different kinds of flags that we've had over the years, especially at the beginning, but you did mention one flag, and if I remember, it was a flag that had chains on it and white stripes, and between the stripes there were chains, and then there was a circle of arms or something like that, and it was either a slave flag or an anti-slave flag, and I didn't know whether that was appropriate for 4th graders. In other words, if you're going to talk about the Constitution, then talk about the Constitution and the development of it. And I know the Constitution is silent on slavery, but if I remember when the early patriots met in Pennsylvania, they worked on the Constitution for an extended period of time and wrestled with what should be in there and what should not be in there. And in your history here, you mentioned the fact that the history or the Constitution is silent on slavery. And it's probably because of the half of them at the Constitution were slave owners, but things like that, and there's civil rights issues in there, which is okay, I suppose, if it was a history class. But this is a English class and developmental. And also you had another section, I think it was in grade 6, where you had something dealing with critical theory and lenses of social issues. And whenever I see something like that, I think of critical race theory or something like that. So I don't know how far a staff member would go in developing some of these lessons.
Oh, Herb, for some reason, you just went on mute, Herb. Herb. I'm sorry, Herb, we didn't hear the last thing you were saying. You're on mute. I don't know what happened there. Can you come off mute?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, I don't know whether there are other things in there of that nature or not, but a couple of them kind of, most of it, I would say 99.99% of it in the seem to be okay as far as I'm concerned, except for these few areas that I feel sensitive about. I feel sensitive about the way the Constitution is addressed and how the flag was addressed. And
so I just wanted to respond, and I actually have it pulled up because I wanted to, I've been writing so much, I wanted to refresh my memory so I didn't think that I was doing something else with it. But
I give you time to get to that page.
You know, I have it in front of me. So what the purpose of this unit, just so, is each read provides a different perspective. So of all the perspectives within the Revolutionary War. So one book is from the perspective of a colonist or Sally Winsler, and then the next one is a former slave who earned his freedom through fighting. So from a different perspective. And then the third one, it does look at in the slavery one, there are two, so it's really the question, just to be specific, look at the two flags, what do you see? Be specific. What does each thing in each, looking at the current flag versus this flag, what does it stand for? And so they go through and look at just the different representations within our current flag versus the other flag. And why do you think the author included the illustration? So there's no, it's looking at author's craft. That's the lens being taken on that, is the craft of why would the author include this? What was the goal? What was the purpose? So it's not trying to pose like a perspective. It's truly looking at why, as an author, what was the goal of the author and why would this be included for that author's purpose? Does that make sense around the flag? Herb?
I'm sorry, what's that?
As in, did that make sense? So does that clarify the rationale and kind of the perspective being taken? So it's not looking at our flag and talking about criticizing it in any way, shape, or form, but rather looking from an author's perspective of why would they include this flag in that particular text.
Talk about the development of the flag and why it was developed the way it was, but you're talking about a flag that has chains on it and that type of thing, you know. To me, it's a little different.
So again, from an author's purpose or perspective, and then
what you're trying to do, but I think from my perspective, you've got them kind of twisted just a little bit.
And I'm trying, you had mentioned, I just wanted to clarify so the perspective, so the reads look at the different perspectives. Because we do feel it's very important to look at history from various lenses. And so that's what we really are building, and why it's integrated into ELA is integration. The more, and again, research will support all of this, but you want to integrate social studies and science into ELA. Can you hear me? Says my internet isn't.
Yep. We're okay. Good. You were frozen for a second there, but you're back now.
Okay. So the integration of subject areas provides like the relevancy, and it also provides extra practice, and research will also support that integration across subjects, because that's what real life looks like. We don't just do ELA. Typically when we're reading about a subject. So it really is important, and you'll see that as the units develop and as I start to build some of the other core areas, that you'll see integration across subject areas in all of the units you're reading. Whether you're reading science, it may look like there may be a lot of content literacy. When you're looking at social studies, you're going to look at some content literacy. Science, you'll see some mathematics. Mathematics, you might see science, but that integration you'll see across as they are developed and rolled out.
Thank you, Erin. Go ahead, Tracy.
I just like to know which unit, which grade level and unit that was specifically talking about, because there's so much that was read in all of those units that I can't find it myself. So could you just tell me which one
grade,
so I can go back?
Grade 4, unit 3.
Thank you.
And he's specifically referring to the structured reads down below.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I see Donna's hand.
Two things. One, Erin, could you put up on your screen a picture of that particular flag? Because I had difficulty, it wanted me to put in a Google account in order to look at some of the things. So I wasn't able to look at certain things. Could you please share that so that I can see?
I actually do. Go ahead.
Mr. Stevens is going to have to share his screen rather than having Erin share her screen because of the way the Zoom is set up. I don't know if you have that open, Phil. Donna, is this saying that you can't access? This is a process question. Are you unable to access the links in the curriculum? Because if you click on any of the hot links, it takes you to a Google site and you have to be logged in.
Yes.
So that was true for multiple links then that you looked at, because a lot of resources.
I gave up. I will tell you, I attempted to look at everything in curriculum set 1. I unfortunately did not have time to look at curriculum set 2. Based upon what Erin's already said, I think it would be most prudent for us to maybe have extra meetings, because it's an awful lot to look at and digest, instead of trying to shove everything into our normal meeting, because it's important and it deserves attention, but there's parameters. Can I share something based upon what I did read though?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, I'm glad that Phil just said at the beginning of this that we need parent input. I looked over several of the English language arts curriculum found in set 1. Since my children are grown and I thought it would be beneficial to speak to a few parents in our community who have young children, I read them the following. And this is a quote: "In this unit, you will teach," and I'm leaving out the grade blank, "that they can write to make their classroom, their school, and their world into a better place. They are writing particular kinds of text for specific real audiences. They will be thinking about what their readers need to know and to write with audience awareness. This unit is designed so that the children do lots and lots of persuasive writing. They begin by writing signs, songs, petitions, and letters about problems they see in their classroom and their school. And then they address problems they identify in the larger world of their neighborhood. As they progress towards addressing concerns that are not right underfoot, they tackle slightly more distant topics and address more distant audiences. They meanwhile also learn more about persuasive writing and writing in general. With your help, and I'm assuming the your is the teacher, children apply what they learn not only to the newest piece they are about to write, but also to their growing folder full of completed pieces." That is for kindergarten. Mm-hmm. Let us keep in mind that our kindergartners need to learn to write letters and sentences and words. No one that I read this to thought this was for kindergartners, and I agreed. Kindergartners can't try to solve large or serious problems. They don't have a foundational knowledge base. Why would we encourage them to start petitions? Why would we encourage them to see the negative in those around them instead of the positive? Why would we burden them with trying to solve larger problems before they learn the basics? We need to keep in mind that these are kindergartners. And then on to grade 4 reading curriculum in the American Revolution. Herb touched on this a little bit. Why would 4th grade curriculum include an article entitled "Why Jefferson's Anti-Slavery Passage Was Removed from the Declaration of Independence"? Did anyone consider teaching the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence? Would it include great sacrifices of those who fought for the freedom that we still enjoy today? And the discussion of the American flag. Now, I'm reading from what was in the format, includes asking our 4th graders what each of the following stand for: circle of stars, white stripes, red stripes, chains, white space between the chains, circle of figured arms outstretched. Since when are chains and arms on the American flag? What is the purpose of this? Grade 6 reading is focused on social issues, and I'm a little concerned. I want to find out what definition of social justice is being used. Then we go to grade 7. The suggested topic of focus in this current on the current debate around the issue of competitive sports. And I quote, "How are kids hurt and helped by competitive sports? What are the inevitable side effects of the pros and cons?" End quote. So then I looked at the mentor text resources. 4 of the titles appear to be pro sports, and 16 appear to be against sports. Now, everyone who knows me knows that I am not a sports fan, okay? But I recognize the benefits of participating in team sports, following through with your commitment, learning to be a team player, following the directions of a coach, working hard at something to improve, the benefits of exercise, and even the feeling of belonging. And then I go to grade 8 reading, which is focused on, forgive me if I mispronounce this, dystopian literature. And that's literature that will focus on suffering and injustice. Again, I looked at some of the mentor texts, included our Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, 1984 by George Orwell. I did read 1984 before. Then I looked up a short story that had a website link. I could see why a student given a choice would choose it. It was really short, probably about a page and a half. Not only was it short, but it was cruel and it was upsetting. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I had trouble getting to sleep after reading about this. Why would schools suggest reading something that is so clearly cruel and where the bully group seems to be victorious? You know, there's a proverb that says a wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands, the foolish one tears her down. I really feel like this applies. I think I want parents to be particularly aware. I'd like it to be where parents can take a look at this curriculum and the stuff that is supporting it, so that they are aware of what their children are being exposed to, and then they can make the decisions of how to participate or how to not participate. Thank you.
Anne? Phil, wait, Phil, did I see your hand, Phil? No, sorry, you're on different sides of the screen, my peripheral vision. Go ahead, Anne.
I have a question for Aaron and Kristen. Are these based on state standards? Are these, and are many of the resources and suggestions for books and references also from the state?
So thank you, Anne. That's what I actually was going to address, both of these. So going back to so in terms of resources, if it's down in a structured read, that is something that Kristen and I have developed. But almost every other resource that was listed outside the structured reads, and a lot of them named, are resources that are built into the Teachers College workshop unit. It is what they suggest, and it's what's been used for long before I got here, for as long as you guys have been using workshop. So they've been using those resources. So none of those are new. Many of the mentor texts you talked, unless the unit hadn't been taught, those are just transferred from what was current, what you currently have, into this document. In terms of the kindergarten overview, which was read, again, that's been taught in kindergarten for years, for as long as you guys have had workshop model in the district. Secondly, they are all targeting standards. What you are reading from is a spring kindergarten unit where they do have words and or short phrases or simple sentences by this point, with really, really coupled with pictures as they're talking. And I will say that in Norwich, and this is something I was extremely proud of in developing curriculum, our kindergartners, talking about, just to give you an idea of what a kindergartner making a difference looks like and finding an issue, our kindergartners studied the birds in our schoolyard and across an integrated unit, and went out and they had to pick, they learned how to do an actual study with ornithologists and look at bird behaviors in certain areas. And through their study, they realized that our schoolyard did not have access to water for the birds. So their activism was to raise money and provide a bird bath. So they actually were able to get a bird bath. So there's kindergartners working together towards activism, which really flips it more positively rather than trying to see a negative. But that was kindergarten. They wrote and got the fundraising. They got the fundraising. They worked with, of course, the teacher led. But it is possible, and we were in the newspapers for it, so it was something we were very, very proud
of. One further question, Aaron, I'm sorry, Herb?
I have one statement. I'd like to just.
Can I finish my follow-up question to Aaron, and then you can make a statement? If you would hold just one moment. The follow-up question, Aaron, was when you list a whole bunch of different potential readings, are they potential readings or are they all included? Are they for the teacher to pick from? Is there any significance between 4 and 16 being unweighted? Are they likely to read more than 1 or 2 on each side?
So the major mentor texts are the teacher where they're doing the shared reading, they're modeling. So those are pretty typical there, unless the teacher, and this is where the teacher input has, if they suggest or have used a mentor text and said this was not the best, or there's feedback where they found a better one, they do submit that to Kristen and I, and we do they submit it. They either say this doesn't work, can you find me one, or we tried, I would love to use this one in place, and we review it prior and put it in the document. So those are changeable, but some of the longer lists have some of the book club books in it. And actually, this is the first unit. So as we moved on, we started taking all of those out and only leaving in the major resources.
Okay, thank you. Herb?
There was one thing that Donna mentioned. I was going to mention previously, but I didn't know whether I read it in the date of the curriculum that I had or not. But it dealt with with sports, and when I read it through, it kind of as because I played sports in high school and college, and I coached sports, and I can see all of the attributes of how important it is in some people's lives, and making friends and teamwork and all kinds of social and emotional things that prevail in the sports. And I read the article of the curriculum, and it hit me that the curriculum was just twisted around, and that they were talking about injuries, and you should not participate in these sports because of the fact that you might get hurt or something like that. And I mean, you can hurt yourself in your kitchen or bathroom or anywhere. You know, the risk is always there. And so if that's in the curriculum, I really was disappointed to see that, because, you know, I always cherish sports. I love them. You know, I'm not crazy about them, but I really enjoy them. And to read something in there where the youngsters in 7th or 8th grade are getting material that is changing that viewpoint is kind of upsetting in a way, and it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair to the students.
Brianna, I see your hand up. You're gonna have to come off mute though. There we go.
Yes, but it looked like Erin wanted to respond to that. And my comment is more about that kindergarten curriculum that was read, so I can hold.
Okay, go ahead, Erin.
I'm just gonna, so I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but one, that those resources have already been being used for years. Those are already, were in the unit. Those are not something we brought in with this new revision. And secondly, the purpose, that is a debate unit. So the purpose is to pose two sides of a topic, so to teach kids to think critically. So as we have, you'll see, we really do work in, we do not take stances. If you read closely, there is no stance that we're providing through the curriculum. We're having kids investigate multiple perspectives. So they really learn to think critically. And so that is the purpose of that. Just thanks, Brianna.
Thank you.
Sure. I mean, isn't the point to use topics that the children are familiar with so that they can apply these skills like critical thinking and debating, right? We need to make sure they know what they feel like they're a part of it, or they have some say. All of our students should be encouraged, and hopefully are encouraged, to feel like they belong in our community and to know that they can be active citizens and they do have a say, even when they're 4 and 5. And I teach kindergarten, and I agree, Donna, that listening to all that curriculum can be a little bit drowning a little bit. But it's written for educators, as Erin said, and there are glossaries included, even for teachers sometimes when it gets cumbersome. And when you're looking at those Common Core state standards, it can be a lot of words and it takes a minute to sift through it all. But I trust our educators to know how to make it age appropriate, whatever the task may be, and to modify it even more so that every child, regardless of their ability level, can participate in some way. So maybe someone's doing a drawing and dictating their words to the drawing, and the teacher is going to write it for them. Perhaps you have another student in the very same class who's able to write 3 or 4 sentences independently with phonetic spelling about the topic. So I trust our teachers to be able to do that. And I trust our curriculum coordinators and all of our helpers there on staff to guide them if they're not sure how. I think it's really important for kindergartners and preschoolers and all of our children to be empowered, to be active, and to know that they do have a say. On the playground at school where I work, there are a bunch of masks sort of just out on the grass because they've been forgotten about a bit here and there as kids have come in from recess. And it really bothers my kindergartners. So they know how to handle that. We have a mask pickup stick in our classroom. There are trash barrels out there, thanks to some other students being active. And there are signs being made by my students all the time and hung up, just reminding people to take care of their belongings, respect our school property, and help each other out and take care of things as a group. So I agree that all that language is a whole lot, but like Erin had said, it's written for teachers. They know what to do with it. And I think that if you ask them, they'd be able to give you some pretty good examples, like helping the birds have some water. That's wonderful. And the kids must have felt so proud to do that.
I saw Donna's hand first and then Laura.
Well, one of my concerns when I'm being told that this stuff is already in our curriculum is we know that our current curriculum isn't working because we have such poor success rate, at meeting minimum standards. So I'm concerned that just because it's there and it's been there for a long time, it may not be working. How you discern what the good is from what the garbage is, I'm sure, is an art in and of itself. But it is not comforting to me whatsoever when I hear that some of this stuff has been in there for a long time. This is the first time I've ever looked at curriculum. And I am particularly concerned. Thank you.
Laura, your hand was up.
It was. I don't know if Erin wants to respond to that first or I can go.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Because actually I was building off of what Brianna was discussing and what you were with the kindergarten. As most people know, right? I taught middle school science for a very long time. But one of the things, and I taught at the STEM Magnet School, which was K-8, and was able to see young children do amazing things with solving problems and with engineering. And I think sometimes our expectations for young children are not high enough. They are incredibly curious and imaginative and observant. And when we give them tools, they can do amazing things. So that's one piece of it. The standards that we have, the state standards that we follow here in Connecticut and in most states, whether they're Common Core or the Next Generation Science standards, they are rigorous standards, and there is a lot of nonfiction in the ELA standards. They are primed for integration of science and social studies. So to go to Herb's concern about the Constitution and the flags, in ELA, you're getting some of that content, but you're focused on ELA standards, different perspectives, author's craft, that type of thing. In social studies, then students are diving into more of the history and learning about how the flag has changed as the country has changed, and digging into more of those. We have not looked at the history social studies standards. We're just starting with ELA. But as Erin was saying also earlier, that integration is so important for students to have deep learning, that integrating between ELA and social studies or ELA and science helps students to make more connections in their learning. So, I felt like all of these were very appropriate and very appropriately presented in an ELA unit where you're looking at these different strands of reading, as I said, thinking about like different perspectives and author's craft, et cetera.
Brianna?
Right, so Laura's tying together all of the subject areas and how the content crosses from one to another. That is project-based learning. That's using all of your tools, all of your classes, all of the possible ways you can to help children learn, and giving them opportunities to learn in the way that works best for them also. And Herb, when you were talking about the flags and the different flags, right away I started thinking, of course, the art teacher is going to be involved. Of course, the art teacher will give them opportunities to maybe make their own flag and represent their own personalities or their family that way. And it made me also think of the music program. We have such a great music program here in Wellington. So of course they'll be learning songs, or maybe even writing their own about how the things that they've learned back in Constitution being built times, and how that affects us now, or how things now are similar, how our country is still going through some changes or some discussions about topics. They could have a chance to make their own song or art piece. And I think that's part of STEAM. That's part of pulling the science, technology, engineering, art, and music stuff all together. And of course, we're going to use all of those things in our subject areas too, like ELA, math, science, social studies, and so on. So these topics are not just one spot in one class anymore. And it actually is proven that children learn best this way, especially when it's in their best media or their best kinesthetic sort of learning. So just a thought.
Thank you for that, Brianna. It's a little confusing because we're only looking at the ELA standards today and not the whole package. But honestly, given how many different units there are, I don't think there'd be any way for us to get our hands around that, something of that size. Erin and then Tracy.
I was just going to go back to Donna. You're absolutely right. It is difficult trying sometimes sifting the great stuff, the gold, finding the gold in some sand. But I will say one thing that workshop does very well, and you'll see it when you see the kids, they love to read. The engagement level and the love of reading workshop really builds wonderfully. And a lot of that has to do with, again, tagging off what Laura said, because the text a lot of times capitalize on the kids' schema and what they already know and their background knowledge. So it engages them, and the higher their engagement, the more they're going to take away from their learning. So those are some of the strengths of workshop that we really did try and strive to keep.
Thank you. Tracy?
Okay, I guess I'm off mute. I was just, one thing I was thinking as some of the questions that came up is that when I read each of these units, I read them as a unit, and I took the whole package, not the individual readings, but the whole package and how it was intended to be used within the curriculum, within that curriculum unit, to see, okay, this is one opinion about sports, but there's this other opinion, and we're going to work those together to have a discussion to make our students be critical thinkers and use those higher order thinking skills to determine why, you know, our own thinking about these topics and how we can, in a debate, you know, have conversations about them. So I think taking them one piece out of context changes how you're thinking of it. You need to put it as a whole group. That was the way I read it. And when we were handed this curriculum as a committee, we were asked to follow some guiding questions as we read through them about the content. Is the content relative to the intended learners? Is the organization of the content reasonable? Is the content tied to and supportive of Board of Education goals and portrait of graduate work? And then do the goals, objectives, teaching strategies, and learning evaluation strategies make sense when taken together? Is this a reasonable way to teach this topic? Do the objectives seem reasonable? Do they seem attainable? And is the schedule of topics reasonable? For each unit that I read, I looked at those questions and I had a yes for everything. I think that we have a very good quality curriculum here. I think it's meeting those goals of what we want as the Board of Ed and a portrait or graduate. And it's research-based. Aaron and Kristen are using research-based curriculums, and I'm sorry, like the letters and all of that is research-based, and it's being based on the Common Core. So I support this curriculum unit. I think it's very good quality, and I'm very impressed with what has been presented to us. Thank you.
Michelle, can I ask Aaron and or Kristen, just share what's missing here, what's different from what we've done in the past in Readers and Writers Workshop, and now the infusion of the science of reading. It's not in these documents yet, but you talk about what that is and what's coming and how they blended.
Sure, I'll speak to some of the workshop, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Kristen for the specific phonics piece and mechanics. So generally, what you do see reflected from science of reading based in these particular units are the shared structure reads, which is really following a close read procedure that comes from letters. So that is one piece that blends science of reading within the templates that you're looking at. The other, and that's reading. In the writing ones, it has a language focus, which looks at mechanics. And I'm going to now pass the baton to Kristen, who's going to talk a little bit more about that, and then the phonics component.
So for those of you who don't know what letters is, all of the teachers, all the language arts teachers are going through a training called Letters, which is language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. So when we talk about like what's being taken out, it's not as much about what's being taken out, it's what's being added. So the training the teachers are going through right now, the pieces of that training are what's being added to the curriculum. So as Aaron was talking about the close reads, the structured reads, that comes from the letters training. Also the language, the conventions, the language focus, that also comes from the letters training. And then the next set of units, which we didn't mention earlier, before we go on to other subject areas, we will be also throughout the summer, I believe, possibly approving the phonics and word study units. So those will be kindergarten through 8th grade. We haven't had word study units for grades 3 through 8 in a very long time. So that is going to be something that's added. So the pieces that are added, we expect to see some really great gains from those pieces.
And that is the science of reading. That's the piece that is not in the Readers and Writers Workshop. We'll call it Readers Workshop. And that's new research that's come out, and that's why they're calling it the science of reading. And you're seeing a lot of districts doing the same thing that have adopted Readers Workshop, are now finding ways to infuse the, what we'll call the scientific data and what we know about the brain and how you learn to read. That's being infused with these units now. You don't have that information yet. It's coming. I'm sure it'll be another 250 pages, but it will be part of this blend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the Unit 1 ELA curriculum presented to us tonight. Is
The set, the first set.
The first set, sorry.
Okay.
I don't have my agenda in front of me.
Just want to make sure we're not going to break it down into separate units. You mean the first batch that came first that we read? Okay.
Yes, that one.
I'll second that.
Rephrase that.
No, that's fine. Set one. And okay.
I will second that.
Thank you. Other questions or concerns? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote on this one, and we'll go across just my screen where you are on the bottom.
I have a question.
Okay, sorry, Donna, I just saw your hand.
Sorry, I was trying to get to that.
I know there's a lag with the mute too. Go ahead.
Has everybody on the curriculum committee read all the resources that were attached? I mean, it was a lot of stuff.
And it's not expected that they're going to read every word of every book that's in every resource. Is that what you're asking?
I wanted to know if everything that is in our curriculum has been read. And maybe not by all of them because it's a lot of stuff, but have they divided it and read so that everything that's in there has been seen by somebody on the curriculum committee or somebody on the Board of Ed?
Aaron, go ahead. Oh, Aaron has to get unmuted.
Thanks. I did want to just add that I wanted to just throw it out. Phil had sent about a 25-page document of banned books. And I can verify that Kristen and I checked every resource listed and to make sure none were on that list. So Donna, you just sparked that. And I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Because one of the resources, and I'm showing my age, is a Saturday Night Live video. And when I was growing up, Saturday night was on at 11 o'clock at night for a reason. And now it's in our 8th grade curriculum. Now, I did not actually go and look at the video, so I can't comment on it specifically. But I think that those things need to be looked at before they can be in the curriculum. Somebody's got to see it. There's a lot of stuff like the one particular story that I wouldn't want anybody reading, but I'm not a teacher and that way, but I think that it's important that curriculum are vetted.
Okay, thank you for that, Donna. I think that does raise a question of expectations. It is not the expectation that the curriculum committee will read every resource and every word of every resource in the curriculum for all of the grades over the next year. That would be more than a full-time job for any one of us. We are hiring professionals and we are depending upon professionals to implement this curriculum. Certainly as we come across them, if there are any of any concern, we can have further discussion about these. As we mentioned, this is an iterative process. So if there's any that you come across, Donna, that you really want to get other opinions on, the story in particular that you read that very much upset you, I think you should share via email with Erin Conley in particular, and we'll come back and have conversations at the committee level about those. But I don't want to get into, who did due diligence or not in terms of reading that level of every resource. They can read the full curriculum without reading every word of every resource of everything that's linked to the curriculum. We're depending upon Erin and Kristen and others to do that work for us, to get us to the point where it comes to the committee to do that. So I just want to set a level of expectations that I don't want anyone on the committee to expect that we expect you to read every word in that. But that said, if there are things that you go through and you find, any one of us finds even afterwards, we should call attention to it if there's something in particular that's problematic for that reason.
Well, and the other concern I have, and I don't know if there's a way to do some sort of search, but recently at a school in New York, there was a lesson and it had to deal with the Great Depression. And one of the choices for what caused the Great Depression was an ethnic group. And it definitely was inappropriate to be one of the choices. I don't know how you look at the curriculum to make sure, the reasoning given was it was some sort of workbook study guide, but it was still there. And I don't want to be in a position where we are promoting hatred of some, saying one particular group was in this particular instance of the cause of the Great Depression. And it concerns me the volume, like you said, it's not practical for any one of us to read every single thing, but I don't know if there's a way to vet it without actually having to read every single thing. If there's some sort of word search or PDF search or something like that, just to make sure that we're not inadvertently including stuff that shouldn't be there.
To the best of my knowledge, that is not possible across hot links. Does anyone know differently? Yeah, Donna, I wish that were the case. I wish it were possible to do that type of a search, but I think you would have to go into and look at every document separately. So, but you couldn't do just a single search. You'd have to search each document without having maybe to read it all, but you could possibly search through it if the document is made searchable. Okay, we do have a motion seconded on the floor. Are we ready to vote? Okay, I'm going to go across the list and go by name of what I have in no particular order, but we're going to start with Laura Rodriguez. All those in favor of passing the set 1 of the ELA curriculum that we reviewed. This is not set 2, that's one we received the second time, but just set 1 at this point. So we know what we're voting on. We're going to start with you. All those in favor, please say aye, and we'll go one at a time. Laura Rodriguez.
Aye.
Tracy Anderson.
Aye.
Donna Cook.
No.
Herb Erico. I'm sorry, Herb, you're on mute.
No.
Ann Grosjean.
Aye. Yes.
Brianna Ross.
Aye.
Michelle Doucette Cunningham. Aye. Passes 5-2. Okay. Do we have a second motion on the second set, or do we want to hold that until next month to give us more time to review it?
Can we hold it? I haven't had an opportunity.
I want you to hold that.
Okay, so we will hold, since that we did not have as much time to review that, we'll hold that and put that on the agenda for next month's meeting, along with, in case we may get a second set to read at the same time. So I'm just putting that up there that we may have to approve 2 or 3 at some point in some meeting, depending upon the timing. But we'll try to always give enough time so that we have more than a week to review those. So
is there a way we can get a printout, not of all the stuff that's linked, but at least of those, it was what, like 4 or 5 pages per unit? About, just because it would be much easier to just have it so I can go through and read it instead of trying to spend more time at a computer screen.
It's 250 pages a set, a unit. No, a set, 250 pages. We've already read like 500 pages. We're gonna kill 1 million trees.
Was
And
there,
ink.
I think she was asking for just the structure, the chart, like the 5 pages.
Not all the backup, because I mean, I printed out a couple of them because I wanted to read them. Like there was, I printed, it was like 4 pages for the 7th grade. I mean, I'm not talking about all the backup. That would be ridiculous.
Donna, I think all you need to do is ask Brenda and she'll make the copies for you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. If anybody else is interested in doing that, please don't make her make 2 copies. So if you're interested, please put the request in writing early so that Brenda has a chance to print out the pages that are appropriate. So she only has to do it once and not twice. So if there's anybody else who would like a copy, please contact Brenda and give her adequate time to do that. Okay. So I think we are finished with new business. Okay, deep breath. I'm going to recommend that we take a 2-minute motion in case anybody needs to get a glass of water. We will only pause momentarily. Are there any board members who need us to take a momentary pause? Are we good?
Yes, please.
2 minutes is good, yeah.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. Go run. Get your glass of water quick.
Michelle, I'm going to pause the recording.
Thank you. I believe we are all returned now, so thank you for your speed. We are going to move on to old business. The first item is the 22-23 Board of Education budget.
Yep, I emailed the updated budget to you on February 28th. It includes the adjustments to programs 3, 4, and 7. It's a significant change. We decreased our outplacement tuition costs and locked in fuel prices. I gave you all of the, and I'm just going to share my screen because it's easier. I gave you everything that's new highlighted in green. Typically, the board wouldn't come back and vote again, but because it was very significant, because of the changes in outplacement and transportation and utilities, and that we actually did lock in a fuel cost, all of it's been updated, so you have a brand new look. It is a 1.26% increase, which is, I think it was like 3.8 or something like that. So that's a huge change. My suggestion to you would be to, this is what I presented to the Board of Finance and what was sent off to them. Because just like with insurance, when we saw changes, we would notify them and we try to be transparent about that. My suggestion to the board would be to vote on this again with this new number.
Okay. Hang on, let me move my screen over so I can see everybody. Are there any objections to that? If not, if I could have a motion with the specific amount of the approved budget, that $9 million number.
I'll make a motion. Did I just make it?
Yep,
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we approve the 2022-23 Board of Education budget of $74,681.
Thank you. And Anne, I saw your hand. Can you come off mute?
I second that.
Thank you, Anne. Any additional questions for Mr. Stevens? Okay. All those in favor of the revised budget for 2022-23 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, so then we're going to have to do a roll call vote. So if you would all please come off of mute so we can go one by one. Herb, we're going to start with you. If you can come off of mute. How do you vote, Herb?
Aye.
Thank you. Anne?
Aye.
Brianna?
Aye.
Donna?
Abstain.
Tracy?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Michelle? Aye. Passes 6-1. Okay. Thank you for providing that additional information, Mr. Stevens.
It was
Moving
good news.
on.
It was easy.
And considering how much fuel prices have gone up this week, it makes me very happy that you locked in when you did. Much worse. Okay, looking at old business. And now the main attraction for which we have all been waiting for so long. We're moving on to old business B, the governor's executive orders and our draft Willington Public Schools COVID protocols.
Yep, if I can start.
Okay.
Obviously, it's been a long 2 years. And we're again proposing some updated health and safety protocols here. The last board meeting, I reported 80 positive cases, COVID cases from January to February. Since that February meeting, we've only had 4 cases. Obviously, yeah, I agree. And the clap is a significant improvement. And so what I want to do is just spend some time and give you the background information about where you came from and why these recommendations. So the first thing is the town data. And so this is what comes out from Eastern Highlands. And we get the town data for you know, the various towns. And so the yellow is Willington. This data again is the most current, but it's from the week case counts of 213 through 226. But I'd say it's pretty accurate about where we stand today. The 2-week change in Willington was 4 during this period of time. And so that's pretty good. Obviously, prior to that, it was significantly higher. One of the other things you want to consider as you make changes or consider changes is vaccination rates. And so this is something that to share this data, you can see the estimated population, who has their first dose of a vaccine, who's fully vaccinated. And so you are really looking at, for students, this 5 to 11. And so 34% have their first dose and fully vaccinated is 31. It's a little lower than some of the others. It's a little higher than others. This data is not something that we get from the school. This data comes through, you know, if someone goes and get a vaccine, that information is then submitted to DPH. So they're gathering this vaccination data. And you can see all the way down the percentages of vaccinated individuals. So again, another piece of data. And then the town level case rates from February 13th to February 26th. You can see Willington again, 4 cases, case rate 4.9, total tests were 163% positive, 2.5. Previous positivity you can see was 6. So the really the high for us was that coming back from the holiday break, that first week, or what I'll call 10 days of January, and the numbers have come down significantly. So this is the report that we get on a regular basis. And from what I'm told, this report will continue to be pushed out by Eastern Highlands. So we'll have the data as it comes out. And you can see again, that high point here for us and how we have significantly dropped over the, you know, since that return in January.
Mr. Stevens, is that a weekly report or a bi-weekly? What's the?
They give it to us weekly. And typically the only issue with the report is it's a little delayed. And to be quite honest, you know, it's nice to see what's happening in Mansfield and Coventry and Tolland or wherever. I'm concerned about Willington. Like That's the data that I want to see, and it's delayed. And so what I can tell you is we also see the case rates for school. Obviously, we know unless someone doesn't tell us, but even if they don't tell us, if they go get a laboratory test, we find out through Eastern Highlands that there was a positive case. So again, our 4 cases in the last month, every time I feel like I contact the nurses, I'm like, how are we doing? And they're like, just tell me to be quiet. Shh, things are looking good. And so that's good data. The other piece that
Bill,
has
those
changed.
4 cases, excuse me, those 4 cases are in our schools?
Correct. Those
Not-
4
not
cases
the
are
town.
not for the town. Those 4 cases are in either center or in-hall schools total. And it could be staff and it could be students. It's not
Because
identified that way.
the town is up around 600, isn't it, total?
Total.
Right. Oh, you just went past it. Yep.
Cumulative right here is 693.
693 now.
Yep.
That's the entirety of the pandemic. That's
correct.
In 2 years, we've had
That's
700
a
cases.
cumulative figure. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Correct.
Phil, that other graph that you were showing below, is that just Willington? When you went to
This?
here? Is that just
So this is
Willington?
Eastern, that's Eastern Highlands. That's
Okay, so
all
it's
of
all
of these towns. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
it's all of these towns that report out to Eastern Highlands and over Ashford, Bolton, Chaplin. It's all of these towns. But to be honest with you, we've matched that pretty well. When we had a really high peak in January, so did everyone else, and we've come down significantly, just like everyone else. So
How many have we had in the last month, Phil?
just 4.
4?
Yeah.
In
Only
both?
4
In one school or both schools?
total. Pre-K through 8th grade, we have only had 4 cases between staff and students. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
From where we were. When I told you 80 in January or February, it's changed significantly. The other measure that's new is the CDC has a new measurement for community levels, and that's this information here. It's determined by looking at hospital beds being used, hospital admissions, and the total number of new COVID cases in the area. We are at the lowest level. So basically what you can do here is this is just their explanation. And when you scroll down, you can see the map. And when you click on us, so that didn't go so well. It's all green. Trust me, it's all green. Let me try that again.
You got
For
some
whatever
of the
reason, it
lettering.
likes the ear.
It's the lettering, yeah.
Yeah, it's the lettering, but it is all green, which is good. So the piece of information, and again, I'm going to make a judgment on the new CDC guidance here, is that it's a measure that they're using by hospital beds. Well, that doesn't necessarily impact Willington. We could have an outbreak, but not have anybody in hospital beds, and we could still be in green. And so I think that for us, it's really important to focus on case rates in Willington, not just the hospitalizations. What I'll tell you is DPH is interested in hospitalizations because that's where they start looking at statewide mandates. But you have the ability to make these decisions based upon, Willington. But again, that's a new way for CDC to look at this information. Again, we're at the lowest level.
So if we go orange, we go back to Matt's.
Not necessarily. It's a reference point for the board. It doesn't mean that you go to orange and you go to masks. If you saw a lot of red, that's where the state may change their statement about local control. They could come back and say, look, at things are terrible again, we're going to institute a mask mandate. Right now, you're only using it as a reference point, just like the Eastern Highlands data, just like your local case data. CDC is another checkpoint for us. So we've been making, health and safety decisions based upon guidance from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is what you just saw in Eastern Highlands. And local boards of ed have the ability now from the decision-making power after February 28th. And now that we have the guidance from those public, agencies, you can make some decisions. So DPH provided, you can see that people know that we're talking about this now because they're joining the meeting. DPH provided boards of ed and superintendents questions if you're considering adjusting your protocols. And I shared those in the actual document that was sent out to the school community, staff and parents, and the Board of Ed in advance. So you could get a sense of what things we had to consider. And parents and staff were given the opportunity to review those protocols and able to email comments to share their concerns or support of the protocols, either one. And I think we particularly got a lot of comments on masking. I know that some people had wanted a survey, but I will tell you that one of the surveys I heard that went out was people were saying it was biased, and I did not want to come across as biased. If it was an email, people could say exactly what they were feeling. So what I'm going to share is, let me just get to this other document here. So based on the current guidance and the school data that I shared with you, and the community data and the feedback we did receive, I am recommending the protocol adjustments that are found in this document. And the most significant changes is in masking. And the recommendation, this came through our school nurses and through our administrative team, and the feedback of the families and staff. And that's making masks optional starting tomorrow. I will tell you, there are points in these protocols, though, that still have mask requirements. And so really the first couple pages of this document are just the background information about from the state and what guidance they gave and what things we had to consider. And then you get into the actual Willington protocols. And these are the things that what DPH has said is that you have local control to make these decisions. It's not that we're saying we just think you should throw out all of these mitigation strategies that you've been using, but you should weigh them and listen to what you believe you should have in place. So this is what we believe should be in place. And so masks would be optional starting tomorrow. Any school community member that's entering the nurse's office would be required to mask, and that's just to in case there's a COVID case in there. Students participating in singing activities must wear a mask unless they can maintain 6 feet. That's been all along a recommendation, and it's one of those areas where they produce a lot of could be, if they're sick, virus, but what's the word I'm searching for? Someone help me.
Airborne particles.
Airborne particles, thank you. And then the students playing brass instruments still would use the bell covers, and that mask breaks would no longer be applied. So that's really the mask protocols. The other piece that's not in this, that's tied to the mask protocols, is contained, it's connected to the quarantine and isolation procedures, the protocols. And CDC and DPH did not waver on their recommendation for isolation and quarantine protocols. And they are recommending that any individual that tests positive, that they can return after 5 days, as long as they're, we follow the same grid we've been using, and this is the grid we've been using all along, that from days 6 to 10, they would be required to wear a mask in school. And that if they couldn't do that, they would have to still isolate or quarantine from home. And so that guidance has not changed at all from CDC or DPH. The other piece that's in here, besides everybody had a chance to see, I think, the food service protocols, the things about the plant and attendance procedures, that's really no different. Is the what happens if we have an outbreak. So basically the DPH this is what they're recommending you use as numbers to determine if you have an outbreak, and then you work with them to determine what your response should be, whether you need enhanced mitigation strategies to control the outbreak. And one thing they talk about is masking as one of the options that could be done at the classroom level, the grade level, could be done by bus. It just depends on the extension of transmission and the structure of the school. So we would make that determination based upon an outbreak using this information. Oops, that doesn't highlight very well up top, which is a cluster defined as 10% of students and or staff within a specified group. And we kind of gave some information about what a group is, or 3 or more students or staff within a specified group who test positive for COVID within a 14-day period. So we would still be tracking that information. And there's no contact tracing as part of this. Still, we haven't been doing that. If we're notified of someone from outside through, Eastern Highlands contact tracing, we would then look to see if there's an impact in school. The last thing I'll share on this connected to, basically you wouldn't want to have to go to a vote right away. You would want to have me respond using these protocols to change if you had an outbreak. And so there's a statement there that basically grants me the authority to modify the protocols in consultation with our local health department and, DPH. I think that's important to have in there, because if you do have an outbreak, you want to respond as quickly as you can to try to minimize the effect. So I think you've had a chance to go through this. Again, the nurses have gone through this. The administrative team has gone through this. The majority of the I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can see you. The majority of the communications and tonight's present to speak were consistent with choice. I think there was only 1 or 2 individuals that spoke up that said, I'm concerned about this. And so, I think the majority of people at this point would like to make a choice. I know Mansfield still, I think they meet on the 10th. E.O. Smith recently made their decision to make masks optional. And so that is really our recommendation at this point. However, this is a board decision. And so you can make comments or provide feedback on that guidance document, and then make a motion as you see fit.
I see Donna's hand.
Yes. First of all, I am excited about this. Would this also mean that our students could be unmasked if they would choose on the bus?
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. The other thing is, I would like to just recommend that we eliminate having our students singing wearing a mask. There was a student, I was told, in Stonington who actually passed out during oral presentation wearing a mask. And the kids are around each other all day long. So if a student wants to wear a mask, they certainly could. But if they're not wearing masks, with 4 students or 4 individuals in the school system, and with the number of people that have been vaccinated or have natural immunity because they've been sick, I think we should let kids sing without having face coverings. And I'm excited that families can make their choice. The other thing I would want it to be clear is that if a family decides they want their student masked, which it would be totally their right, that the school and the teachers are not the enforcer of them wearing the mask. That's a discussion the families need to have. No one should be given a hard time, no matter which way they make their personal decision. So people that are masked or people that are unmasked should not be treated poorly by their peers or by the staff because of their decision.
Correct. And Donna, that's a really good point. And I know E.O. Smith had the same conversation. And it's one of the things that the state put out in their questions. And it's kind of my directive out to staff is and my request to families too, is no matter what the choice is, if there is a choice, that people respect what that choice is. And that, we're going to support students either way. If they're wearing a mask, obviously, we have a bullying policy, but if there's someone saying unkind things about them, we're going to take care of that. And the same goes for if an individual is not wearing a mask. We wouldn't allow someone to belittle their choice as well. And so that's part of our consideration.
That's with the exception of someone coming back from COVID in their second 5 days, then it's mandatory and they must be masked throughout the day unless they're outside.
Correct.
Would that also be required that they be masked on the bus?
Correct. Any school functions that they would have to be masked from days 6 to 10. And, it's a recommendation, but instead of just saying, look, you're going to be out 10 days, we'd rather have that student back in. And that's why we're trying to provide that option.
And how would you handle when a student coming back from COVID is not wearing a mask? What would the process be?
They would have to go back. They would have to be picked up and go back and isolate. And that's all part of the communication with the nurses. I will say our nurses have done an outstanding job. They use that flow chart just to communicate with people and let them know kind of the process of, what they, have to do. The union, I only got a couple staff members and they had the opportunity to respond to this as well. And the couple of the responses that I did receive, there were really two things. One, they said it's time for us to make a choice, to allow choice. And the second comment came out of one of the unions was, what's our obligation going to be to enforce? And if a child comes to school with a mask and it's not something that we're mandating because they're not coming back from day 6 to 10, we are not going to monitor that student wearing their mask appropriately. That will not be the responsibility of the staff. Where we will be discreet is when we know a student and we have to notify our staff members of that case where a student's coming back from days 6 to 10, that we can let them know that, you have to discreetly remind that individual that they have to wear their mask if they're having a problem, falls down, whatever. But with a number of small number of cases, we believe that's manageable right now. Because 4 cases in a month.
Herb?
In the food service protocols, Phil, are we increasing the number of waves of students going in there, especially where we're having them sit in alternating seats and not across from each other? Is there enough room in there for the number of students we are putting in there at the present time, or are you planning on increasing the number of waves?
It's the same as it is right now, Herb. And so Hall School has enough, Center School has enough, except for I believe 1 grade level, and that has a class that eats up in their classroom. So that's been happening for a while. And my recommendation would be, if we stay on this path, if we, you approve these tonight and things continue where case rates continue to drop, you're going to hear me come back and say, okay, let's drop this mitigation strategy, or let's drop this one, because right now there's a seat between, they're basically sitting zigzag. They're not sitting directly next to someone. It's helped us out. It also, during the time where we were contact tracing and had to have people quarantine, we were ending up putting people out constantly. It made it really hard. So this is a mitigation strategy that I believe right now we would leave in place as it is today. And then what you would do is, you come back in a month and you consider it again. And if we're on the same path, you're going to hear me say, it's time that you change that up.
So just for clarification purposes, can I just clarify one thing he just said, Herb, and then you can continue with your question? So the clarification is the statement that would give you the power to reinstate whatever protocols are necessary if there was an outbreak would not apply for reducing protocols as cases decrease. It would come back to this board. Is that what you were saying?
I'm saying if things got better.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So
If things get better, it comes back to us. That's not up to you. That's
correct. If there's an
okay.
outbreak and I need to make a decision quickly, and I'm going to make that decision with Department of Public Health and in Eastern Highlands, that's what the caveat is in that statement. But if it's right, you're correct, Michelle. If things are getting better, I would come back to you and say, look, you have another 4 weeks of outstanding data. Things have improved. This is my recommendation now. I believe that you should change this. And we're gradually releasing those things. And, I heard Donna say that about the masking, about singing. that could be one of those recommendations that, you know, it could come from the music teachers, the parents, the administrators, the nurses. That's one of those things that we could do. I will tell you that the Eastern Regionals, when they performed, every kid was in a mask.
I'm sorry, Herb, go on. We interrupted you
As
for
far as
clarification.
we're all concerned about the health and the safety of students, and if we go optional, some students won't be wearing masks, some will be wearing them. As far as the physical plant is concerned, and it's an important part of this whole drama, are we still going to continue with the cleaning and the ventilation, checking the ventilation and air conditioning and all the other things in the physical plant to make sure the building is cleaned properly and in the same manner as we have been doing in the past?
Correct. So basically, I mean, the buildings are cleaned each night anyways, but the new protocols that you see there are some of the things that we've been doing, but I thought it was important to show that we're going to maintain those. And so we've been running the ventilation because that's important. We'll do that. Hopefully soon we can open windows. The air conditioning units, we're going to allow to run based upon this draft protocols. They just can't, the idea is that you don't want air blowing across multiple people. That's the idea behind when they shut that down. And so one of the things that we've have said in there at this point is that portable fans, we don't want to put people in a situation where, you know, a student moves it and it's an issue. So we just said at this point, no portable fans, but I am hoping we have a couple of months before we have to consider that again. If things continue to improve, that's something that we go back and we look at again, because, you know, 90%, I would say, maybe higher, of our buildings don't have air conditioning. And those fans just moving air are helpful. But that was one of the things when they started talking about ventilation early on, was don't have air blowing across folks. And that's why when we put fans in schools, we had them, they're exhausting the air from the classroom. One of the reasons our heating bills are more expensive, but we didn't have ventilation in some of those classrooms. And so that was why it was important. We'll continue to do that.
Anne?
This is going back to Donna's comment about the singing. Our music room at Center is very small, where the children sing. I don't know that you could create 6 feet between the kids. One suggestion, when the weather gets nice, maybe they could go outside and sit in some of the outdoor classrooms we've created outside and sing. But I would almost stay with the mask on during singing.
Singing outside?
No, not outside.
Okay.
Outside. we could take them off.
So we're interpreting this that if they're outside, they wouldn't need masks even to sing.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And one of the things, Anne, is that, I mean, having the carports is good. Our music folks who are you know, really want proper acoustics, it's hard to sing outside. But we're going to use that strategy for every classroom. If it gets nice out, you know, we're going to encourage people to use the outdoor spaces that we have. One, because it's nice to do, and two, because it's, again, another mitigation strategy that you can use. Singing is no different. The other thing that we are going to look at, and I know Jason Phillips at Hall has really looked to do this as well, is because that gym at Hall is large. At Center, it's a little bit smaller, but if we can get 6 feet and get some of our smaller classrooms in there, that might be something that when the gyms are open, that they can use that space and spread out and not have to worry about masks.
Excellent. That's a good, I like that.
Additional questions or comments from the board? Herb?
Phil, we have, both schools are pretty self-contained. When the staff and the students are in the building, the doors are locked. No one else can come in, generally speaking, but if we have volunteers going in and mechanics and people, will they wear a mask, or are we going to,
Same protocol. So if a volunteers, right now we're allowing volunteers back in, they have to be masked. We don't ask about vaccinations. But if someone's coming off of COVID and they're can share that information, that's the expectation, is that they wear a mask days 6 to 10. But right now they can come in and they would be following the same protocols. Our protocols, your protocols have really reached into, and I know some people had some questions about the buses, because the bus company said drivers don't have to wear masks. And I responded and said, well, actually, you set the policy for what the expectation is on the buses. And so they went back to masking until it goes to choice again. You make those decisions. It's been the same thing for recreation. When they use the gym at night, the expectation is there's a masking policy, even though it's not a school day, it's an expectation. And they had to do that. I mean, I've seen it, volleyball at night, basketball at night, they've got to wear their masks. If you make it choice, it becomes choice for them as well.
so you think this protocol that we have will pretty much cover our bases, and we'll be able to operate 100%? Unless something happens and then you'll have to intervene.
Correct. And listen, I think the most challenging about this pandemic, it's been 2 years, it's been a long time. The most challenging thing for all of us has been getting new information and going, but before you told me this, right? And that's really challenging to hear. And I think we've learned a great deal. I think we've learned that we want kids in schools for sure. And that remote option wasn't the best thing for us. Some kids thrived on it, but for the most part, we want our kids in the buildings. I believe that the recommendations that are before you today for protocols still maintain some health and safety pieces that are necessary, but it also significantly opens it up for choice. And again, with the caveat that if things happen to go, get bad really fast, that we can reverse it. But I've made all my decisions, and I think my reopening committees know this about me. I've taken all these recommendations from the health professionals, the DPH phone calls, from the epidemiologists. That's where these decisions are coming from. And I feel confident making this recommendation because they're saying, look at your numbers, and our numbers are supporting that. If we have a problem, I'm not just going to go blanket and say, hey, everybody in school mask. You have to hold me accountable to that. I just won't do that. If we have an outbreak across, all classrooms, you would be hearing me, and publicly saying, look, we have a problem. And I'd probably ask the board to reconvene a meeting. But in cases where it's small outbreaks happen in a classroom, we're just going to target that area. And that's really the intent of these updated protocols.
So at our board meetings, you'll give us an update if anything transpires, but.
Absolutely.
And if it's a major.
You'll hear from me well before the board meeting. Parents and board members will hear well before, and I'll continue to put out COVID letters so people know what's going on. I had said, that I was going to do it every 10 because we had so many with that 80, and then we stalled on 4 for the longest time. I may change my practice now just to try and do it weekly or, every couple weeks, especially now. So people that are nervous with the change know what the case rates look like. And I truly believe this. I don't think people really care what's happening in Tolland or Coventry. They want to know what's happening in their school system, what's happening in my child's school. And that's the information I think that, we need to share regularly, and we'll do so.
Phil, which clarify?
I think we should continue to monitor this area just for the health and safety of our students, staff, and the families too. And I think the protocol as you've presented us gives us really a good way of handling it. And I want to thank you, Phil, for putting it together. I'm sorry, Ann, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay, Herb. Phil, would you just clarify that about if you had a cluster of cases in a classroom, what would that look like?
So I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to go back to the article, but there's a certain number of cases that they look at, and in a group, and we'll call a classroom a group. And so basically what they look at is, and again, this would be in consultation with DPH and Eastern Highlands, is that if we saw a small outbreak in a cluster like that in a classroom, we would have conversation with them and look at who's sitting where. It could be that it's just their recommendation to us could be, hey, you have 4 desks together. 3 of those, kids have got COVID. We're going to recommend to you that you have this small group of students masked that we're still there. That's going to be up to them. It also might be easier for us just to say, you know what, in that classroom, these 3 sections sit together. Let's mask, these 8 kids. It'll be case by case, and it will be as what we'll call as least restrictive as possible, but leading towards, again, the safety of other kids in that classroom. And again, with the guidance of DPH and Eastern Highlands. And, Herb is saying, keep us posted on those things. My superintendent calls are every other week with DPH, and they're not slated to stop. And I expect that we're going to hear about how people are handling those things. And if they're finding strategies that work really well. But again, we're going to maintain that choice as long as we can.
Thank you.
Further clarification on that, Phil. If, say, there was a small outbreak in a classroom and you decide we're going to mask, would you have masks available for the students? You wouldn't require them to carry them with them everywhere they go and remember it every day, so that the school would, if somebody has a mask they especially like and they want to keep it with them, in that case they could. We're not saying they have to mask with the school mask, but you wouldn't put that onus on the kids to keep that.
No.
Okay.
No, we still have, we'll order more masks if we need to. They're not going to be N95s. N95s are not meant for a student. If a parent requests an N95, we have them. We could give them one, but the majority of the masks that we will give out, and actually not the majority, the mask that we will give out would be a surgical mask.
Well, I saw Laura's hand first, Herb.
Yeah. Just kind of a add on to that clarification. Because I'm thinking, if you have a cluster of kids in a classroom and you decide they need to mask, like, what would be the protocol for communicating to the other parents in that class? And, as far as confidentiality of being, having COVID, just how would you deal with the other children in the class and the parents?
We'll just say that we had, there's an outbreak in your child's classroom, or it could be, we have to be careful because sometimes groups get really small, and that's the confidentiality piece. Sometimes it's a reading group and it's 4 students, and there's an exposure there. But the idea is that I'm communicating, not me, the principal and the nurse is really communicating with that family, and then they're going to determine, what needs to happen. And we're only talking about if we see an outbreak, we're not talking about masking forever. It's a short period of time. It could be 5 days. And if there's, 5 days is if there's no symptoms and things are okay, because remember, the person that's positive is no longer there. They're isolating. Within those 5 days, if things are looking good, and obviously we still have tests. If a family wants to test, they can do that. And then that mask would come off again in that small group. That didn't help you, Laura. I can see it in your face.
No, I'm still puzzling over how this works. So if you have an outbreak in the classroom, you have a number of students who test positive.
Sure.
So they then need to be home for 5 days.
Correct.
And then when they come back, days 6 through 10, they need to be masked.
Correct.
So within that, doesn't that take care of that? Or are you saying other students who were sitting with them who have not tested positive would then need to be masked for a short period of time?
Think about the exposure. The days 1 through 5 are supposed to be the time where if you're around someone that was symptomatic, that's the time where you're typically going to see symptoms start or test positive. That's why I'm saying 5 days, because we want them in school. We're not quarantining them because they were close contact.
Okay.
Right. That's the change. And so it's something that,
Okay, so it would be students who were close to the ones who tested positive and they're staying in the classroom, but maybe being masked. This is just this one scenario you're talking about.
Correct. And that's why you have to have the conversation with DPH and clusters. I mean, it's ironic that we're not contact tracing, but we're small enough that we surely know who was near who when. And we're going to ask the question about the boss or things like that. So we are going to gather some of that information to help make that determination. But the idea is that that person doesn't then have to go out.
Okay. And I just, while I was kind of talking, because I wanted to just kind of, I'm sorry, Herb said actually what I wanted to say. I feel like this is an incredibly thoughtful plan, and I appreciate the work that went into this to think about, okay, how do we go from here and plan it out and give us a protocol so we can see the big picture of, hopefully we unmask and it gets better and better, and we take some of the other
mitigation.
Thank you, mitigations away. But if it does, and I don't even want to say it, right, but if another variant comes around, we have a plan. So I wanted to thank you for the thought that went into this.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Are there others who, I see your hand.
Yeah, just Phil, you probably have mentioned this before, but the nurses have been through a lot the last couple of years. They've dedicated a lot of time and energy to this pandemic, and they deserve a lot of credit, I'm sure.
They do.
I was wondering what their role is in relation to the protocols in the nurses area. Is she wearing a mask, or will she be wearing a mask? And will students going to the nurse's office have to wear a mask?
So yes, and this is staff as well. Because you don't know who's in the nurse's office and what's going on. And again, this is a layering piece for us that we could remove. So we had an administrators meeting with the nurses included, and we went through all of these protocols. If our nurses are in their offices by themselves and they choose to take off their mask, they can do that. But when students or staff come in, and typically you're going into the nurse's office for an issue, the expectation is that there's masks, and that person, the student, will not need a mask with them. There will be masks at the door, so the student can just, when they come in the room, they can just put a mask on and be protected. If things are good, then the mask goes in the trash if they don't want to wear it, and off they go. But yes, they would have choice as well, but unless there's an individual in the room with them, and I would say they support that because they were part of the writing of that protocol.
If she finds someone that is contagious, is she the one that calls the parents and goes through that protocol?
Correct. And that's why I say they follow that flow chart, and explain to parents. That's where all the dialogue comes from.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'd also have to continue the protocol of do not send children to school sick.
Correct. And that's always true, Ann. And it was kind of ironic that I left in just the, if you have a child or an individual, staff or student with a fever of 100.4, that's like the magic number from the medical professionals. We didn't make that up. That comes from medical advisors and epidemiologists and doctors. But that holds true today. That's in your handbook already. This just happens to be that we're going to maintain those, It's still in there. It's just awareness. Don't send your child, or staff members don't come to school sick. That's the expectation always.
Additional comments or questions from the board? Okay. Seeing none, for expediency's sake, I'm going to move that we accept the protocols as presented.
I second that.
Thank you, Donna. Now that there's a motion on the table, are there any additional questions, concerns, comments that you would like to make? Okay, seeing none, we're going to do this as a roll call vote. And we're just going to go across on my screen. Brianna, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
Herb?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Tracy?
No.
Donna?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 6-1. Okay. Thank you all. That was a difficult vote. I know if I were a parent with a child under 5 at home, or anyone in the house who was immunocompromised, I would be beside myself right now. So I recognize that this was a difficult call for many of us. But I also recognize that it has to happen sooner or later. We're moving in that direction. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we'll continue to move in a positive direction that we've been now. So, okay, that is it for the content of the meeting. So we're moving now to present to speak, and then we have time for board comment before we adjourn. So this is the time on our agenda where we allow the public up to 3 minutes each person to speak to us. Remember, this is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting, so we cannot comment back to you. This is not a conversation. We ask only that you identify yourself with your full name and address if you would like to comment to the board. And to do so, please either come off of video, come off of the stop video, come onto the video so we can see you and raise your hand, or use the reactions button, use the raise hand feature there so that you come up to the screen so that we're able to see you to unmute you, because otherwise it's hard for us to do that. So is there anyone on the call who would like to speak? Arthur Christensen, can you unmute him? There we go.
Arthur Christensen, 14 Birch Meadow Lane. I like to think I'm a fair man, so I would like to thank the board for voting in favor of making mass optional. I know that it was a difficult decision. My other topic to talk about is hearing some of the things that were happening in this curriculum that's going to be implemented were kind of shocking. And if it's a curriculum that's going to teach critical thinking, but the examples that you gave, you could drive a hole through the critical thinking, it really makes me wonder if this curriculum is appropriate. For example, the kindergartner is giving the water to the birds using their critical thinking and becoming activists. You stopped it there. But if you explode that out to an nth degree, the birds have wings. They have a water source somewhere else. What if they're the food source from the other place they get their water? So now with a bird bath in the area where the birds are, you lower the food source for something else. You disturb the ecosystem. Now, do I think we should be teaching that to kindergartners? No, but it's just an example of where the critical thinking conveniently stops in a curriculum that's supposed to promote critical thinking. In addition, with the whole sports debate, I understand it was a debate class, but if you're providing materials for a debate class and one side of materials outweighs the other side 4-1, it's not really a fair debate, is it? It's obvious where you're leaning and where you want the students to lean in that debate. So that's my concerns about this curriculum. And lastly, real quick, on a personal note, I feel that Tracy Anderson was very rude to her fellow board member, Donna Cook, for jumping down her throat over something that Donna wasn't even referencing or trying to bring up there. And I really think she owes her an apology. Thank you.
Other members of the public who have something to say? Please come off of the no video or raise your hand on the reaction screen so that we can see you. If not, I'm going to, if you are on screen, Peter, thank you. Peter Latinsis, if you can take him off mute. There we go. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Michelle. Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. I want to, I think, thank Herb and Donna for raising the concerns that they shared tonight about the curriculum that regrettably you chose to pass anyway, 5-2. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm exactly like Herb. I'm unabashedly proud to be an American, imperfect though we may be, and proud of our flag. The notion that this critical race theory is now being infused into our school curriculum is deeply disturbing to me. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when the Russians invaded my country in 1956. My 91-year-old grandmother, my mother, I'm sorry, is watching a second time on television now if the Russian troops spill from Ukraine into Hungary again. My family experienced this kind of tyranny firsthand. We know exactly what it is. And for you to impose that on our students in the form of this hateful critical race theory that's been so controversial throughout our country recently is very upsetting to me. I would respectfully ask, despite your vote to approve it, a copy of the curriculum be made available in the library, because I would like to review it myself. And I thank you for your time.
Anyone else? I'm going to either please come off of video, and I'm just now looking through the screens, making sure there's no one else. Peter Tanaka, I see your hand is raised, and then Kylie.
Thank you. Peter Tanaka, 125 Mason Road. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Peter.
I'd like to agree completely with Pete Latinchis on this. At the very least, a copy of this curriculum be placed at the library so the public can share in it. I think that the curriculum of our students is very important, and we should remain as transparent as possible on what we're teaching. Thank you.
Kylie? You're off mute now. Go ahead.
Hi there, Kylie Foltz, 321 Talon Turnpike. My question is, are the Board of Education members attending the curriculum? I know you can't answer, but are they attending the curriculum meetings? And if so, I feel like a lot of these questions that are asked could be answered within those meetings, whether they're not attending them to get the answers, or I just don't feel like it should be all the way to the Board of Education where we're approving this, where there are questions, all these questions come up that have already been discussed in the curriculum meetings. So I'm wondering why they're not either in those meetings and asking those questions there, or looking at the curriculum before that time to get those questions answered. It seems crazy that it becomes this point where we spend so much time going over things that they've already really delved into and spent all this time researching to find the best avenue, to put in our curriculum. It seems crazy that we're at the Board of Education meetings going over and over the same things that the Board of Curriculum or the curriculum advisors have already gone over. So I'm just wondering if it's redundant and they're missing it, or, is there a way to kind of stop that from happening? That was just my question. Thank you.
Okay, are there others? Catherine Kenyon, I see you've raised your hand. You're next.
Hi there. Catherine Kenyon, 16 Mason Road. I just want to weigh in a little bit on this curriculum discussion. as a parent of 2 children in Center Elementary School, we talk a lot about different viewpoints and different perspectives. And my impression of what has been talked about tonight through our professionals who are on the call, sharing how they came up with this curriculum, is that was kind of what they were trying to get at. And I think that's really, really important, that even when we're talking about America, even when we're talking about history, people can have different perspectives. This is a diverse country, and the way it came into being, there were lots of different diverse people who saw that going different ways. I don't think that assertion means that anyone is not proud of this country. I'm incredibly proud of this country. I'm incredibly proud of our flag. And I'm proud of the fact that we have a country where students can learn about different perspectives and different beliefs, and the way that the Constitution was formed impacted Black people, impacted women, impacted slaves in different ways than other people. I think those are important perspectives that students should learn, that make us a strong country. I don't think it's a criticism. I think that's what makes us great, that we can have those discussions. So my impression is that's really what they're getting at here, and trying to infuse perspectives and ideas and different thoughts into how we discuss these topics. I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive, that discussing different perspectives means that we're somehow criticizing America or saying there's something we should be ashamed of. We should be proud of the fact that in America, it's not like the Russians invading Ukraine, where you can't say a different perspective. In America, we can do that. And I think we should encourage our students to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I do not see any other hands. So I'm going to do one last look through the screens in case someone has come off of video. John Mitchell.
Hi, this is Jenna Mitchell, 64 Timberlane. I just kind of changing the topic here about the professional development days in regards to the school calendar, especially for the upcoming year. I know that this is targeted to address learning gaps related to the pandemic, but just wanted to bring up some concerns from other parents, including myself, about the impact, you know, for families as far as childcare, especially elementary school. You know, I saw on the list that after school care would be beneficial, and that would also include this household. I haven't seen any further feedback on that. You know, other parents I've spoken with also said that they were under the understanding that this would be an occasional early release, where now it's every other Friday for the upcoming school year, which is a real challenge. So just wanted to see if you could either consider coming up with some after school programs for the elementary school, or potentially doing like once a month to ease the burden on families. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your comments. Is there anyone else before we move to the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go for board comment. Is there anyone that wants to go first, or shall I just run through our list the way we've been doing the roll call votes? Okay, Anne, we'll start with you.
First of all, I'd like to thank Joan, who's been with us at Center School as a secretary for 32 years, and wish her a wonderful retirement. And goodbye to Jen and Mary, and welcome to Brittany. We're glad to have you all on board. And I like that idea of the after school program. Maybe along with taking the masks off, we can reintroduce the after school program too, which might be helpful every day after school for kids, as well as on those early closing days. Thank you.
Okay, since I'm not seeing hands, we're just gonna walk through my screen. So Herb, we'll go with you next.
I will like to thank the staff and endorse what Ann just said about them. They're retiring and new positions. 32 years is a long time to be in a place like that. Also, I want to thank the superintendent for putting together the protocols for the masking issue. And it was very thoroughly done and very much appreciated. Also want to thank the people who spoke today in the present to speak section of our agenda. Hearing from people in town is very informative, and I think every board member listens and reads their letters and digests them and modifies somewhat their opinions on different issues.
Okay, Brianna, are you willing to go next?
Sure. I wanted to make note and congratulate Mr. Phillips and our musicians. I think our music and arts departments at our Wellington schools are fantastic, and I'm glad they were able to have that opportunity. It's nice to be able to gather with folks again. And I just wanted to take a quick second to encourage our families and our community members to please respect and support one another as we go forward with this change in mask requirement. It can be uncomfortable for some people to have any kind of change. For the students, staff, and families alike, it might feel a little bit odd rather than celebratory, and that's okay. Together, we'll support one another and be respectful and move on through to the next phase. So thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks, Brianna. Laura, you're next, then Tracy and Donna.
Sorry, I had to find that unmute button. So I think pretty much what I had to say has been said. So just make it very quick. Truly want to thank all the people who wrote letters and spoke up and are engaged in our community. I think that is really important. And I definitely wanted to congratulate the choral students and Mr. Phillips on Eastern Regional. I remember that being such an exciting time when I was at Hall. Jen Edgerton, I taught with her my last 4 years when I was teaching both 7th and 8th grade. So I'd absolutely wish her well and understand that wanting to be closer to home, and wishing Joan retirement again, 32 years. I actually was just talking to her last week when I went in to Center School for Read Across America. And had a blast. I have to say that was so much fun, and my first time in an elementary school since the fall of 2019. So wonderful to be in there. I think that was it. I wish everybody well, and to kind of reiterate what Brianna said about it may feel very uncomfortable for some people, the changes. I know even this past fall at Eastern, students who had been remote for a year, they expressed to me how difficult it was to be back on campus. And that was something that surprised me. But any of these transitions, as we try to get back to normal, can be difficult. And as Brianna said, we'll get through it together.
Thank you, Laura. Tracy?
I get to the end and there's not much more to say, but I do wish Joan, congratulate her on her retirement, and wish Jen Edgerton and anyone else who, the others who are leaving, I don't know them as well, well in their new adventures. And I don't have any other further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Donna?
As Tracy said, most everything's already been said. I would like to specifically thank Phil Stevens for being aware and locking in the fuel prices when he did. I know he was watching it closely and you did the right thing. So I wanted to make sure I said that. The other thing I thought would be really cool. Okay, so Joan is an amazing lady. Any of us who've had a child go through center school have encountered Joan. And so I would like to encourage everyone, you know, for those of us whose kids are already done and out, let's each write her just a note. Whether you say, you know, thank you for whatever it was that she touched your heart, or just wishing her well. It doesn't have to be long, but let's get those kids putting their writing in practice. They can learn to write a thank you note. We can do that too, and just shower her with cards and notes, so that she realizes how many lives she's touched in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Did you say her retirement date was May 1st? So it's before the end of the year. So just as a note that they should get to center school before May, if you were going to do that. One thing that hasn't been noted that I just want to clear a misconception. We are not teaching critical race theory in our schools. That's been made very clear at multiple meetings over the past. We do teach critical thinking, which is essential in any education system, because we want our children to be able to look at things and think about them and not just accept what they're told. Is absolutely true. We want them to, especially for example, internet safety. We want them to look at the internet and say, is this a good source? Is this somebody I trust? We want them to think about how one goes about making a decision. And I think that that's really an essential skill. And I don't want there to be any confusion because the terms are similar. But I just wanted to clarify that because there did seem to be a comment or two throughout the meeting that had some confusion there. So thank you all for your comments tonight. Thank you, fellow board members, for your service and for reading 500 pages of curriculum this month. It's only the beginning of the amount of reading we're going to be doing over the next 18 months or longer. So maybe you should get your reading glasses fixed before it gets worse. Thank you all. Good luck with everything. And I think we are ready to adjourn the meeting for this month.
Motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Seconded by Laura. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, and it's unanimous. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Night.
Right.